So we're going to talk about the groundhog here. But real quick, did you check to see what the groundhog predicted about spring yesterday, which was February 2nd? Go ahead and answer the poll here. Did anyone rewatch Groundhog Day?
Obviously.
Yeah, okay.
And live tweeted it with my family.
Don't drive on the railroad tracks. So we have.
Yes, I did.
All right, so we have, this is a poll, and you notice it's got two choices here. You can have many more choices as options. But if you click the B here or the A, it'll remind you what the option was. But I'm projecting this for you so you can see what the teachers see. For the kids, wouldn't need to because I've got all the information on my device. And I can push that out for the students to see, look, this is a percentage. We had about 50%, 54% said no, I hadn't checked, and a few of you said yes. So let's see what Phil said. So we're going to go to Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania. I'm going to take you directly to an article. If you click that little blue button, it'll open the article to tell us what Phil said. I'll give you a moment to scroll through the article there. It's not very long.
Spring was really good yesterday.
Okay, I'm going to give you about 4 more seconds to read the article. 4, 3, 2, 1, and now here's the test. Okay, according to the new story, the legend of the groundhog comes from...
Oh.
Also, if you need to refer to the story, it's not linked, but it could have been. I didn't know. Sorry. All right, we'll discuss the answer in just a moment. No pressure. Don't change your answer based on this. Usually I tell teachers don't talk while they're doing an activity because they can't listen to you and do the activity. They're not listening to you. So don't talk. But I would tell the teachers. All right, so I'm going to pretend like everyone's answered, but I do see who hasn't. So I have a blank here, and I can see which kid I need to walk over and see what's going on. Are they okay? Drop them? Are they asleep? But I can click share, that red button there, and I can give you immediate feedback. So what comes to you is you see the answer to the quiz, but because this was a one-question quiz, you see the class chart there. And you can see that lots of us as a teacher, this is something I need to teach better, obviously. But if you scroll down, you can see what your answer was and what the correct answers were. So we get that immediate feedback, and what's really cool about this is sometimes the kids are going to argue with you about that answer, which is great because they're engaging with the problem, and you're like, cool, if you don't agree with me, found it. Why do you think so? You get to get deeper with the concept. All right, so let's talk about the legend. What has to happen for the groundhog to predict an early spring? So I'm going to share with you, rather than ask for hands to be raised, I do have the article linked here. I'd like you to describe the conditions that have to be in place for the groundhog to predict an early spring. In one sentence.
Hard for me to check my email when you're teaching me this way.
Yes, and that's whenever you're doing professional development. Once we all get an earpod, you're going to be really happy because I know how tough it can be. One time I was actually teaching earpod. I was at this school, and these teachers were all sitting at a table, and the principal came in and introduced me, and he left. He was just like, thanks, okay, so I've got these people I don't know here. And I had a table of teachers who were had a stack of things they were grading all together. And I said, do you guys know how to launch an earpod session now? Because that's what we were doing. And they said, we're gonna learn this later. And I was like, oh, okay, well, they had to be like really awful to be able to say that. It wasn't just easy for them to be passive aggressive. So it was like, at least then you kind of got an honest, like, what's happening
They had to be
here.
awful, it wasn't easy, passive aggressive, got it.
Exactly, it just needs to be a little difficult to get off task. All right, so you can see here, everybody does everything. I have everybody's answer, but instead of me asking to have John, I'm gonna click this here, John here. If I click share and I push John's answer out, you guys can see his answer on your screen, but it doesn't have his name. So I know who said it, but you don't. And this is where, as a class, I'd say turn to your neighbor. Do you agree or disagree with the statement? So go ahead and do it. Do you agree or disagree with the statement?
Disagree.
It's true, and you have to predict by your face of your shadow and there's a light to cast a shadow.
That's fine. Where do you agree?
Talking to your
I said
neighbor.
that.
You have a good culture in your classroom.
Disagree?
It still has a plot or airplane, right?
All right, so what would happen in a real class with students is that the kids would talk about, and John, where's John? He's right here. So John, what would happen is if you were a student in the class, you'd be like, that was mine, I did that one. Even if I said, why is this almost true? You know, like to the class. They still like to out themselves, but they don't have to. So if it's a student that's nervous about that, they don't have to. So here we go, I'm gonna give you another one here. I like this answer, cloud cover, because you can't see a shadow, or the underwriting of a corporation selling silver. Makes sense. We have such a cynical.
Ned Ryerson has to do something?
So as you have all the answers from the students and you use their words to drive your discussion, it's so powerful because they don't have to volunteer, they don't have to raise their hand, they don't have to put themselves out there. But they love it whenever it's their words that are being discussed in the groups of people. And Nearpod's one of those where we have to remind teachers kind of this paradigm shift that we have, where when I was in school and when many of you were in school, we had computer time. You know, it's pretty independent of what happened in the classroom. We'd go and did everybody play Oregon Trail growing up?
Oh, yeah. I died of all kinds of things.
And so you either played Oregon Trail or you taught using Oregon Trail. It's our shared experience. And so, but we weren't really learning about the Oregon Trail in class. It was a very independent activity, and it was fun and engaging, but it was like the computer was teaching us, not the teacher. But now that we have classroom devices and that the state has really helped provide resources for schools and districts to have those, we need to help teachers to be able to use those devices in regular direct instruction. And that's something that is new for some people. Like, oh, when they use a computer, the computer's teaching them, not me teaching them through the computer. So helping them to kind of move past, go to the corner, put on headphones and learn English, to like you're going to engage in cooperative learning strategies using technology. So we're going to do one last one here. So Phil predicted an early spring, and I want you to draw this. We're going to do this little activity here. And I want you to use your mouse, do the best you can. I don't know if you have a touch screen, you can do that too. This is a new feature here that you can see kind of within an 8-second delay, the in progress drawing before they've submitted.
I should have warned you, keep them appropriate.
Oops, already submitted.
That's what accountability.
No, I'm drawing. On my device, I can't get down like else.
See in trading. Another reason as a teacher, again, you're not projecting this for kids generally. They don't need to see this part, but you have the information. And so I think about the kid who's like left field Larry, who just says rando things and derails your discussion, the kid we're really scared of. But like, he can put something crazy up here. It's okay, like I'm just not gonna use that in my discussion. Classroom management is built in. The other piece of this that I always tell teachers is like, you'll notice the kids are gonna finish at different rates. But because you have the information you need, so JT, where's JT?
Right there.
You're JT. Okay, so JT, if she's a student in my class, so I'm very nervous about what she does with free time. And that as a teacher, I sometimes will rush the rest of the class because I'm very nervous about giving her any space to squirrel around. Like, instead of me yelling at her, getting mad at her, or rushing everybody else, I'm going to use that time to one-on-one differentiate. I've got the information, let's add to it, let's clear up a misconception, let's talk that through while the rest of the class is working, causing the teacher to need to really not be dependent on any part of the room, that they can move to wherever the kids are. You can actually push any of these out. So I'm going to choose this one here, Jennifer's drawing. We can talk about it. So imagine this is a math problem or something else. It goes to your screen, you don't have any name attached to it. It doesn't have to add herself. So any of these, you know, what's the problem with this one? The groundhog would see his shadow, which is what scared him. His mind goes back in the hole. All right, so thank you for experiencing this part. All right, so I wanted to show you a couple of things before I'm done here. How does Nearpod align to Utah's initiatives? So we have our effective teaching standards, and we promise these three things: relevant curriculum with high standards, high quality instruction, effective and formative assessment. So talking about the platform that's engaging, it started out with just activities. Like, it was just a platform. When I started using it in Canyons, it was very much like you make your own stuff. You build it in PowerPoint, you put it into a Nearpod lesson, and it makes it harder for people to check email or squirrel around or do something wrong in your class. But it did ask a lot more of the teachers than it does now. Way more design. So now we have all of these integrations, and namely the Canvas integration is super powerful, is important for districts too, because I know that coming from a district where we implemented Canvas, how many of you have helped implement Canvas in a district? It's a bear. It's a big change. It's a big shift. And so if we can help districts make it easier to implement Canvas and use that well, then we should. And so Nearpod helps do that. We also have curriculum that includes 7,000 plus lessons, as well as these extra supplemental curriculums that include digital citizenship and literacy, social learning, English language learners, and more. So let me just show you really quickly what the Canvas integration does. It's more than just a link in Canvas to their lesson. It actually takes the report from what the students do, puts it right into SpeedGrader. So a student could go through a Nearpod lesson, participate in all the activities, have those activities show up in an individual student report, which goes right into the Canvas SpeedGrader, which for teachers, it's like, why should I use Canvas? What does it make it easier? Well, it gives you the ability to connect your students with the content really well. So that's what the SpeedGrader report integration does, and it's amazing. And it has actionable data. So helping those teachers get to know their students will help them like teaching, which will help them stay teaching, which is what we hope for all of them to do, and to be better as they go forward. So we have lots of core lessons that are included, and these will be included in the Nearpod subscription that the state will provide, hopefully. I'm going to talk about it like it's going to happen. And that, you know, they'll have lessons that they can start. A teacher doesn't have to create everything to begin using this tool and engaging with their students. They can start to use things that are already created. And it's not like a teachers pay teachers Wild West situation either. We have content-based lessons with content partners like NASA and iCivics and different groups that are established publishing partners. In addition, I think that a couple of these are included in the subscription here, especially digital citizenship and literacy and the college and career exploration piece of it. So, like Jennifer said, in the end, we hope very much that it will get funded and that all teachers and students all of us in the state agency will have access to this tool to be able to facilitate our professional development. And I say, if you're not teaching Nearpod, what's great about with this is that we don't need the TVs. Everybody needs to bring their technology, but they're gonna be using their technology for your professional development that you're doing. So here's a copy of the PDF of the legislative ask that's here. It kind of outlines what's there, and I've highlighted in yellow the specifics that apply to this particular platform here. So you can download that if it shows up in your PDF reader. You should scan. All right, so I want to show you one last thing of how the company Nearpod and I helped develop this with the training department there, how we're supporting best practices using this. You don't want to come in and just give people a tech training, this button, this button, this button, this button. We want to show them how to use it with students in a way that really engages them and aligns with our instructional priorities that we have. So we have what's called the Nearpod Certified Trainer Program, and we're using this with a few districts in the state where we come in and I did this in Utah. This was my assignment. Nearpod's based in Miami, so I was a remote employee, so I was handling everything in Utah with training. And so we wanted to first help coach the coaches on how to use this tool and how to train other people to use it, but also to have how to really facilitate adult learning is what we also wanted to help. Because there's a lot of people, like, if you're coming straight from a first grade, second grade classroom to training adults, it's a different game. And so helping them to be able to build that capacity at the districts. And then we had a level 2, which also went into integrations and some more best practices. And so for the requirements, as we know, professional development doesn't really get to the kids unless there's some kind of follow-up or coaching cycle that's part of it. And so we wanted to make sure that there were requirements that they had to then turn that around. They had to do the training or the professional development with their people. And they also needed to teach kids using Nearpod, any lesson. And the main reason for that is because sometimes we've got coaches in the state that maybe are a little resistant to going into classrooms and interfacing with teachers and connecting with the reality of students. It's kind of demanded that they do that. And then we have a Canvas course in the Nearpod instance where all these artifacts are collected. And then they get the certification. So these are some districts that are using this program to help build the capacity of their coaches. We've done trainings in all of these, and they all have the Nearpod professional development pieces. And I think that, at some point we could probably, once the bill filter goes through and they get that funding, we can talk about helping, if there's anybody here who'd be interested in that certification, we could do that too. And so I'm going to finish with this Collaborate board. Can you click no on that for me? Thank you. All right, so any thoughts or questions? Go ahead and add them to this board, if you don't mind. Do I have 5 minutes or are we done? I have 5 minutes, okay. Okay, I know, I didn't want to let it go longer. I appreciate that. It is not currently licensed yet for us. USB doesn't have a license yet. I know that in talking to Todd and everyone to make sure and follow procurement rules. And so Nearpod was like, yeah, we'll give it all away to you guys. And so
We have a quote for a price.
Yeah. And it was like, we want to make sure
We
that.
got the same price that UN got for their staff, so, which is.
Yeah, so they didn't want to mess up anything as far as.
Then when I heard that Laura was doing it up on the hill, I was like,
So hopefully it'll come up soon. So at the bottom here, we have a question of why is there down here this button here. So Jennifer, if you see where it says 28? If you click that button here on the teacher's side, it shows you who's here and who's logged into an active browser. And if they decide that they close the browser or the internet drops them, their dot will turn red. And that number down here will turn red, so that'll alert you that there's somebody who's not with you. If they're on an iPad and they leave the app, then it'll turn red. but if they open another tab in the browser, it won't turn red.
That's right.
So what I tell teachers, it doesn't solve all of your problems, but as a teacher, one, you know your class, so you know your usual suspects. And the other thing is that you're not standing where I'm standing. You're moving around the room and making sure that they understand that if your students are off task, you know, they should know, they should feel accountable because you're so helping teachers to, again, that bridging that gap of like, it's not the computer doing all the work for you. It's just a tool as part of that. Your classroom management, all the things you know still apply. All right, so I appreciate you guys participating in this Neuropod lesson. Thank you so much. And
I need to know the picture, Dr. Height.
It's a GIF that if you were to download it, you would see that the goats are screaming radical.
thank you. If you like the goats picture, you can click the little heart underneath. I want to say I identify with that. All right, so yeah, Nearpod is great because it's engaging, but for me that's not the most exciting thing about it. The most exciting thing about it is that it really just gives coaches, it gives administrators a way, you know, if good practices aren't happening in the classroom, the students aren't able to actively provide feedback and do all those strategies that in our dream world everybody would do, a principal can say, I've got a way. I know how you could do this better, and you could use the stuff we've already invested in. So, thank you so much, and I'm sure there's more to come.
Nice audience. Like, we've gotten so much better and all. You guys were great this morning. All right, so we've got our 9:30 part of the agenda, and I want to respect that it's 9:28. So I'm just going to wait 2 minutes and let you do a couple emails and start on time, just because we have to stick really close on the schedule to respect that it's 9:30. So 2 minutes, we'll get started. If you want to just talk with your colleagues or check a couple emails, and then I'll bring it.
Presented to the then it needs to put them on. Michael was there, right? Yeah. On the committee. How were you not?
I can't get out.
It is.
Why we need this?
Oh, sorry.
Jennifer?
No. Touchscreen. I know.
I look forward to an answer.
I mean,
Because when I read the rules, I was like, it's not that easy.
Should I?
I'm trying to learn.
Might have to use the guest.
The guest is a,
March 21st, Saturday.
Okay, it is 9:30. We'll get started now.
go.
So if you come to a time, I will start on time as close as I can. So here we go. So team updates. You've got our PowerPoint and the handout in the Google Drive. And it's in your calendar invite for the link if you need it. So first up, Miss Melanie Durfee, Dr. Durfee, has added another credential to her name. She is now an educational technology leader, a certified one. So congratulations. Certifiable as well, right?
That's a national
One of the other.
I was fine upstairs.
I do, Rick does, Kathy,
Kathy.
Sarah Young,
Okay, so number.
Whitney Phillips,
Jessica Privacy.
Jessica Callan,
Privacy. Thank you for.
Jessica Callan.
I don't know what her last name is, but Jessica Privacy.
Right, Kelly Cobb.
Very cool. So, do you want to describe a little bit what it is so people know why they're clapping for your certification?
Yeah.
I defer to Rick.
Oh, Rick. She passed the buck.
That wasn't on the test.
A number of years ago, you know, as technologies come into schools and that, COSN, which is a national organization, determined it would be really good to have a program to certify leaders in districts of their ability to not only to guide and use technology in that district. And so it's built on a framework of how many different 10 different skills in that, anything from how to build a team to data management, business management. And then as you go through there's a curriculum that goes with it, and then at the end you take a national certification examination, which consists of 115 multiple choice questions, and you have to reach a certain level, passing level and when you finish that, then you have to move on to the essay portion. That's what, they're changing some of that now, but that's what, those who have it. And then you had a 4-question essay that was then graded, and that would equal the certification, which lasts for 3 years.
Oh, it only lasts for 3 years.
It's the times now.
This is something we'll talk about in endorsement land later. Thanks, Rick. Well, congratulations, Melanie, and those that have earned it before. The next one, the Digital Teaching and Learning Team received an award for their innovative work, and I'm going to have Todd share what those details are because you will know more about it.
Sure. Rick? It's from the same organization, COSN. It was a Community Leadership for Digital Equity Award, just recognizing the DTL grant program and our work around trying to bring equity into digital tools across the state and supporting districts in their work.
So Utah is definitely being recognized in lots of spaces for the DTL projects that we have going. So thank you, DTL team, for representing us well. Care committee, I think John's actually doing this if I remember right. Okay, so I've got your slides if you want to go next. They have a short presentation on trying to get money from you. Go.
Basically. So and I didn't know if other people wanted to, at the very least, like raise your hand if you're on this list. So the CARE Committee is a small group in teaching and learning consisting of these people. They didn't raise their hands, even though I was raising their hands. They're a very timid bunch, caring but timid. This is the group. Oh. Because I was basing it on an invitation that you sent, bringing those names, not your name. Kira is actually the head.
That's a good leader. They forgot
to. What we do is we provide support to TNL staff who are undergoing significant life events. So either happy life events or less so happy life events. We're just trying to kind of recognize and provide some amount of support through those things or recognition to those things. So what it looks like is we're the group who make sure everyone gets a birthday card, sends flowers out to people who are ill or out for some other reason. We throw the parties like David Smith's retirement party that we had a couple months back, and we also decorate cubicles for new employees' birthdays. Do we decorate for anything else? Mostly those.
80s.
Right? And babies. Also babies. Occasionally marathons.
It's still in draft.
It's still in draft.
If it's official.
And why we do it is we just feel that at work it's very helpful to have a supportive body of friends ready to listen, respond, and recognize all of these events. So just, basically the point of raising the hand is if you have one of these things come up that you would like to be recognized, or if you just are undergoing something that you need a little support, feel free to let one of us know. And we do, this is the money asking part of it. All of this is based just on voluntary donations from the section. So if you're interested in donating to help buy the flowers or the birthday cards or the decorations or what have you, Karen Johnson collects, maintains a small employee fund that you can contribute to any time. So that's it. Thank you for your time.
That's perfect. All right. Back to the moment to the page. I had some feedback from the coordinators around snow day expectations. We had some kind of couple of days there that the governor called off, and doesn't necessarily mean our agency calls off. So we tried to communicate your coordinators. I communicated with the coordinators of my team, and then it went kind of filtered down just in terms of the phone tree kind of experience. In the future, I'll try and be more responsive around what to expect. My expectation for you, though, is that you take care of yourselves, whatever that looks like. And so I had a late staff meeting virtually for those of you that were stuck at home to try and benefit that need. I'm not trying to force you out into the environment, but to kind of keep things going. That we always have the stuff to happen, but if you can't make it or it's just not going to work for you, that's okay. We record it. There's lots of opportunities. So really think about yourselves and your families and your needs. Work will be here tomorrow, whether you showed up on a snow day or not. If you have leave, there is sick days that I'm going to tell you will never use all of your sick days here unless you really get sick, which I hope for none of you. I know the coronavirus is a topic of conversation today for the governor. Sid will be kind of doing some conversation about what does that look like for schools and our work if something does start to happen on a grander scale. So just kind of be aware of that. Expectations from me as your director is that you think of yourselves first and the agency second. So make the decisions that are best for you and your families. Whether we call it off, delay it or not, you have the right to make a choice of what that looks like. Does that help a little bit on expectations for snow days? All right, if you need further clarification, come see me. Board meeting days, I've noticed a lot of people scheduling meetings on board meeting days. The expectation is you're listening to board meeting, especially parts that might pertain to you. So those are not days I expect to see a lot of people in meetings in the agency. The board has actually asked us not to hold meetings on those days, especially with external stakeholders. I know sometimes we're trying to do internal meetings, but it's ultimately you might want to look at the agenda and see some of your staff may need to be in those meetings or be listening. And so try and not schedule meetings on those days. You have a little more flexibility on Friday mornings when it's USDB, not as necessary for us, but committee meetings, there are topics that come up that you should probably listen into because I know I have a lot of fun with some of those. So just kind of be aware, check the agenda. Board meeting does impact your work. Maybe you might not see it as directly, but there are things that we have to change because decisions get made in board meeting. And so helpful to kind of have that context. So just trying to encourage you not to schedule a bunch of meetings during board meeting. A lot of, especially legislative season, was a lot of conversations and like moments where it'd be helpful like for people to run into the room. And luckily many of you were listening in at your desks or sitting in the lounge with me. If you're ever looking for me on a board meeting day, I hang in the lounge on Thursdays. It's a lot easier for me to make my facial expressions in the back of the room, but also be available for moving forward. And so that's where I hang out. I get in my office when I'm listening, I get too like zoned into what I'm doing and totally don't hear board meetings. So I sit in the lounge because it kind of keeps me a little more aware. But whatever works for you in terms of it, tuning into it, definitely check the agenda. There's parts of it like new staff parade, that's what I call it, when the new staff come in and introduce themselves. And we have like 30 of those, like go ahead and tune out for a minute. That's probably not, unless you want to know who all the new people are, it's kind of interesting. But just some things to kind of think about as you're planning your lives. Questions or clarifications on board meeting expectations? All right, staff changes. As you saw in my email, Jeannie Rowland resigned due to some long-term health issues that she has that are kind of preventing her from being able to work full-time. So we are hopefully going to hire someone in the next couple of weeks to replace Jeannie in her role and kind of deal with that one. At this time, we're expecting up to 11 and a half new positions with legislative session if everything goes through the way it is right now. That's a lot of new staff. So just know when I'm pushing, I am not one to hand things off, but when I reached out last night to ask for a little bit of help, there's a lot going on and I'm just trying to like prep for what's coming and knowing that our teams will most likely shift. Currently, some of our teams are much larger than others. We'll probably bring on 1 to 2 more coordinators with these new positions to kind of help with the demand of staff. So some shifts happening. It will also help in our redesign of keeping the teams together. So we'll make all those decisions before the redesign happens so you know that our goal is to put our teams together ultimately. And so we'll reorganize the teams based on what we get out of session. But at this point, the bills look like they're going through, it's 11 and a half new positions for us. So that's a lot of non-room in cubes. So we will also have to figure out what that looks like. We might end up utilizing our teleworking or like calling it, I think, who was it that has the hotel experience? Todd. At Zion Bank, they don't have enough offices for everyone, so they call it like, you get to stay in the hotel for a couple days this week and then a couple days later like sharing a pod or a cube. So we're gonna have to see what that looks like. We might have to double up in some of the offices and things like that. So just keep in mind, we don't have room for 11 and a half new positions. And so we're gonna have to be a little strategic with our space moving forward. And so just want to kind of prep you, change is coming, not only in our design of space, which we'll talk about here in a second, but even the faces you will see in our agency and inside our department alone. Questions, concerns, thoughts? A lot of information I've been processing for weeks.
Jennifer, can you give us examples of some of the new positions that you're?
Sure, I have a list on my phone, because there's so many that I would forget some. So, the early reading software program has the opportunity to have some admin built into it, and so that would potentially be a specialist position as well as potentially an assistant position to help with the DTL team. It's getting quite large, and JC, you do an amazing job, but at some point, it's too many people. And he's shaking his head in agreement. So having another support staff for that particular group. We have a 1.3 million ask us an agency for, I think it's 7 new positions. In our department, it's 3. And if I remember right, I need to go back to look at what I asked for. But I think it's 2 specialists and 1 program specialist. So probably 1 research consultant and then 2 program people. And those program people are related to initiatives, but as long as those initiatives are covered, we can kind of use those program people for what we need. And so we'll be kind of looking at demands and pieces like that. Robert, in fact, is on the Hill this morning handling the civics bill, which would give us a half-time civics person to run a civics grant, but they could also help with social studies, and so trying to see how we can maybe get a elementary social studies to support Robert as we have new standards coming, and the work of a K-12 specialist, as Ricky and Melissa can kind of attest to, is a lot, and so trying to scale that down, just like Jody experiences having help and PD. There's a leadership bill. That one will most likely provide a coordinator position, so it's around providing professional learning and mentoring for new principals, and so having some additional staff to join Lisa in that role and supporting our principals. And then early learning, if the early learning bill passes, there's 1 specialist for math, and then we have the 2 jobs that Sarah has never been able to fill for literacy that we kind of contracted out this year that we're hoping to bring internal. So there's kind of 3 early learning spots, 1 in math, 2 in literacy that will be specialist positions. If the most bill goes through, which is the math and science opportunities for students and teachers, there's a half-time specialist built into that. And then HB 99, which is the optional enhanced kindergarten, that will be a research consultant, about half-time position as well. So that's kind of where we are. So some research consultants, some support staff, and a bunch of specialists. So any other questions? So if you know friends that some of that sounds interesting, this is the time to start feeding it out. They won't start until July 1. All of these positions will be legislated, so money doesn't flow until July 1. So it's an opportunity for us to kind of get ahead of the game. A lot of the LEAs kind of start hiring this time of year, so once we have session close, it will be contingent on the governor signing, which he doesn't have to sign usually until about the middle of May. But generally, unless there's some controversy, most of the things that go through the legislative season and get passed, the governor signs off on. So, other thoughts, questions? All right, deep breath. All right. So things are going to be kind of shuffling up. We'll keep you in the know. I'll meet with coordinators. We'll kind of talk through some of it, take it back to teams for feedback, and get us there. Sarah?
I know not everyone was here the day that Naomi Watkins started. She is our new secondary ELA specialist. She started last Monday, so she will be coming later today. She was supposed to be running the thing today, but anyway, she'll be back.
She's delightful.
She is
I've
delightful.
heard her already. She's awesome.
Yeah, we've got some good new ones, and she's unfortunately at an event that the presenter didn't show up for that we had hired. So that is her first week on the job.
The agency.
Try and soothe over a bunch of people. Like, here's breakfast. Have a great rest of your day. If you want to stay, there'll probably be lunch. Like, that's kind of where she's at. So, just feel for Naomi. So we've got always something fun going on for our staff. So the next piece that I want to just give you a heads up on is the April retreat. It should be on your calendars. If you're new, you probably want to put it on your calendar. April 2nd, likely at the Hogle Zoo. My intentions are we'll have about half the day doing content, really focused on getting your budget plans ready for next year. For some of you, we'll have some content. For others, that budget is not a thing. We will do some kind of team building activity, so get ready to do like a scavenger hunt in the zoo and wander around with the animals and have a task. So we'll kind of give you some hopefully fun experience there. I'm still working out details, but we've reserved the space. It's whether we can use the zoo at some kind of reasonable cost because the agency doesn't pay for such things. Questions about 9 to 3 is kind of what will work.
What day was that?
April 2nd.
It's a Thursday.
Yeah. And Karen put it on your calendars months ago, probably September. So hopefully it's on there and you're like, I haven't had to look that far ahead of my calendar, but it is there. So that is our retreat time. Well, I built a new budget form for us to kind of use this coming year, and we'll do some other kind of department things. But okay, let's take a look at the redesign. Redesign is most likely going to happen sometime between April and June. When I get a smaller window for you, I will let you know. It is likely to be about 3 weeks of us, some of us needing to be out. Those of you in the cubes right now that were redone last year, those will be a quicker turnover. We do need new carpet in those spaces, and you'll get the motorized desks. But the first top 2 pods here, you'll be fixed pretty quickly. You'll be able to come back sooner than others. But again, the construction of every other cube, that kind of thing. So as we get closer, we'll start working out a kind of teleworking schedule for everyone. Most of you will need to do some work from home moving forward. We'll need some people here to do phones. I don't really want to forward them home, but we'll probably have you go house up somewhere else and maybe do a couple days in the office and the rest of the days out of the office and just make sure we have some coverage from a phone and licensing desk perspective. So this is kind of what the new layout looks like. The hallways, just so you can kind of get a feel, this is about an 8-foot hallway. This is about 7 feet. This is the current hallway we have now with the glass pod row, and that's about 7 feet. So in between these is actually a little bit larger than what that main hallway looks like, just so you can kind of get a sense of it. It's kind of hard to feel. This is looking at it from like if you were in Robert's cube, which no longer exists, right? Kind of looking down. This is where Norma and Crystal are right now. We'll be combining that cube, so you just kind of trying to position you so you can kind of sense it. Here's where Karen hangs out. So you can kind of see the new space, kind of clean and organized. They're just bunks, is what I call them. You'll have a bunk mate. Most of you, they're 2s. They're not considered 4s. The 8-foot hallway is not conducive to a pod. I think at this point we have enough 4 pods. We will have 1 4-pod for licensing, but generally we have already got enough pods that it made sense to have more bunks. Our single pods will be right on this side, so you can kind of see them here. We'll have a storage cube as well for the carts. That's closer to the doors and has a wide enough door to get the carts out without banging. The carts know what I'm talking about. We won't put any like actual desktop or anything in there. We'll have some cupboards and stuff, but generally we'll just do really just for the carts and such. So that's kind of what we're looking forward to. Carpet will go first. They'll do paint. Then they'll come in and actually build the cubes. It's about a 3-week transition. CTE and whoever rooms with them is also going through a remodel, so they're going to either try and do like, okay, CTE, you get carpet this day and a half, and then they move downstairs and do carpet. And then we do paint upstairs while they're doing carpet, and so they'll probably do paint before carpet if they're smart. But we'll get new like baseboard and everything will be replaced or refreshed in that way. I'm still doing interviews with staff. Lighting has been kind of a question or feedback that came through the survey. What I've been told is let's see what it looks like when all the glass is in, and then if we need more lighting, we can do like the kind of desktop lighting that we can do to kind of light up your spaces. So we'll kind of see once we get it all in what we need. Part of the motorized desk ability is that we no longer have the bare desks, so those will kind of get retired. The benefit of that is you'll have a lot more desktop space back, and I don't know, it's awkward for me, those things. Like maybe it's the height, and I'm just like, hold on. So the motorized desk will make it really easy. It will also be more adjustable for your height, where the Veridesk is kind of really one height when you fully pull it out where it's supposed to be. This will allow it to be more conducive to your height. There is about an inch gap on the desk to allow the desk to go up and down, so something to keep in mind with your fingers. But if you're not holding the sides of it, which you won't be, you're pushing the button, it will go down, it should be okay. I'm going to give you all the details I know about the space. Question, tack board, there'll be like one section that has tack board. I wasn't even sure what tack board was, but it's where like you can push pin things into your cube. I was like, tell me more. I don't know what that means. Yes.
Are we going to, I really like having my screens or above my computer. Will we still have the ability to have them raised on something?
We're thinking about, so Ricky is not here today, but he's getting some arms to hold his monitors up so they're not actually on the desktop. Your monitors have a huge base, and so we're buying a kind of trial thing with Ricky to see if we can raise the monitors, and that gives you your whole desktop back, which allow your computer to be there, your keyboard or whatever, but allows you to have a different height for your monitors as well.
Are they like what IT has?
Potentially. I mean, it just basically doesn't have anything that takes up any of your desktop space because your monitor bases are rather large for most of you and takes up a lot of room. So my hope is to give you as much space in your cube as possible that you can negotiate. But also just as trying to have when people come in, they're not coveting a cube. We're going to have the standard pieces in every cube. So we'll have a lateral file, everybody will have a drawer set and all of that kind of thing. So we'll have some really consistent pieces in each space. So you can kind of expect that to be that way. We'll have kind of these will all look the same when you walk through, and then you can spice it up with your own. Some pieces that people suggested, like how can we bring a little more artwork into the space? So we'll think about designing our space to be a little more happy and have artwork, and maybe Kathy and Tamara can help us get some artwork that kids wouldn't mind giving up, and we can kind of decorate that way. And the pillars are our biggest challenge. So the nice thing about this wide of a gap is that the pillars don't become as huge of an issue within the spaces. So we won't have awkward cubes. The cubes are a standard size. If you've been upstairs, they are that size, but they are doubles for most of them. So I think it's a 7, Aaron, is it 7 by 6 or 7 by 8?
7 by 8.
7 by 8. So 7 by 8s together makes it a 16 by 8 or 14 by 8 when we combine them, which will seem more roomy in the space instead of being, if you've seen like special ed, where they have all singles, that's the kind of experience, but we'll have duals instead. Mostly. Okay. So just, as soon as I know more on the calendaring, Cammie was trying to figure out if she wanted to kill herself off and like get both projects kind of going concurrently. So like the people come in to do the power, like pull all the wires because you have to pull them out to do all the other stuff. Like just have them do one upstairs, come downstairs and alternate. Or if she wants us to go in June and then go in April. So I'm pushing for earlier just to get it done. About June wouldn't be so bad because a lot of you will be out for Standards Institute or you'll be on vacations and things like that. So we'll get it done this fiscal year because I need to spend the money in this window. And we've been waiting a long time. We've been talking about redesign, I think, for 2 or 3 years at this point. So it's time. Any concerns that you have that you don't feel comfortable vocalizing to the group, please come see me. This is the time to kind of have some of those conversations. I am still working on the one-on-one interviews, so basically, just trying to get to know what you need in your own spaces and thinking about those. As we move forward with this design, headphones, for example, anybody who wants them will do an order. We'll get the noise-canceling headphones for whoever needs those to help you knowing you'll be with a bunkmate. We'll also have conversations when you do know who your bunkmate is and have facilitated conversations around what does it look like for whatever. So I'll give you some guiding questions to work through with your bunkmate so it can be as successful as possible. But headphones will be part of that story as well, so that you can have those focus moments. The quiet room, we'll kind of think about what that needs to look like to give that opportunity. It'll probably move spaces, probably go into Jeannie's office, and we'll put 2 or 3 people in the current office. That's the quiet room right now. Given how many staff we need, that's a nice room with a window, but if it's shared, it doesn't seem as maybe the same. So that's kind of where we're headed. Lots of things to shake up in the next little while, but come talk to me, be patient, we'll figure it out. Nothing we can't probably overcome in a lot of ways, okay? And the light will be better for everyone once we get the walls down, so just know lighting will be way better if you've been in any of the other departments that have the walls down. Much brighter. So I think we'll see some better lighting happening as well. Okay, all right, I'm gonna move on then. This just gives you an over top view, so in your PowerPoint slides, if you want to take a look. The biggest change to the current pods will be the DTL pod. They'll lose a space. Right now we're in fire code violation with the way the cubes are, that you can't come out the staircase door and get by if there were a fire, so we have to kind of clean that up, which means we kind of lose a space here. We'll do quite a bit of redesign DTL in your space, so you'll be everyone just to prepare, as Karen has been trying to prepare you through the final countdown. You have to take everything home. Like nothing can stay. So this is the time to start like cleaning out, take the next couple of months to get rid of things, because ultimately whatever you haul home can stay there, or you can bring it back, but you will be responsible for moving that in and out. So there's nowhere here to store it. We're gonna take it home and bring it back when it's time. So just keep that in mind. I'll try and give you enough of a heads up when we know it's gonna start to allow you to do that. But in the meantime, there's nothing stopping you from cleaning things out or taking a few things home every week to kind of make it not so burdensome when the time comes. Okay? This is the storage cubicle. If you're like, why is that one weird? That's where the storage will go.
When you say take everything home, do you mean everything personal, or do you mean all of our monitors?
Let me find out on monitors. I don't think we want you hauling those home, but I don't know where we put them either. I mean, I'll see what the other departments have done. It's a good question.
Filing cabinet.
The filing cabinets can stay, so they'll reuse what we can, and we'll order more, and then we'll get out of the bunker and all the fun stuff.
Anything in them?
Anything in them, take it out, because they have to move them around, and they may not actually get back to your cube. So we're not numbering the filing cabinets, like that cabinet that you had may not be the cabinet you get when you get back. So just keep that in mind.
So what I'm thinking is, as we're going through paper boxes, maybe we should start saving them, and we'll stack them in where the carts are, and then when you're ready to take something home, grab a box.
Smart. I love it. Yes. So any boxes that you have of materials that come in, let's go ahead and start holding on to those, because you all will need some boxes to be able to move your stuff. So I'm not looking forward to it either, but it will be okay. We'll all make it. All right, there it is. If you have any questions about the design, let me know. The flow, I think, will be much better, and the hallways are much wider than what I think when we saw this picture originally. We were a little worried about walking through people's cubes, but if you can imagine, like right now we have a 7-foot hallway, and this one's even bigger. It's like 8 foot 3 inches. You won't feel like you're walking through people's cubes right now. So I made sure the hallways. All right, that is the redesign part. I think we are finished. So we're going to take a break till 10 for the finance updates, and hopefully finance comes down. I don't think I see them yet. And then we will move on to the future. So we'll just do a couple-minute break again. Break, go.
Oh, well, yeah, there were some new ones that certainly help us. I had to change it.
I mean, for me, it doesn't matter.
You just hit back on that.
I had a network problem this morning.
Freaking out.
And here I am yelling at her, get done, get it done. And I'm like, oh, get it.
They're like, sorry about it,
I love it. So things are being part of it.
In this first year,
I'm still not a grade level. I spent my whole weekend preschool because there's such invited all of us to get over this. But you know, they figured we had to go. Saying that Sunday was our social studies race.
One moment, let me
They were great.
It's like you go to see the NCTM, I got it.
It's I would say 1 out of every 10 visits.
Urge to play with you?
Invited back because we keep doing. So splitting it boy-girl, the girls against guys, it's a more active. Yeah. So every house has a winner, every house has a loser. I just feel bad for Rory because no matter what he does, he's always up to but we had a great time. We went to that. Yeah. Show up next door.
No, I read with my student
Jerry Mitchell is out. I took her up. And then there's
Playing with the band.
oh, did you? Those are more fun.
They are. Lighting was horrible.
Yes. I'm good with our kids. Don't worry about it. I love dark.
Yeah, it's great, but I had a friend videoing me.
was just trying to look at it. Was supposed to audition.
I know the my house has been wrapped. I brought a wild hair. What do you need to get out? What are you finding out? Sorry. Right? That's really so, I already
I would not recommend.
Why do I have to like we're gonna come and we're gonna do this and then
And then I'm all sick.
I don't really care.
I don't think it's too much. I'll just tell it.
So I'll just send it. Other than that, I've verified.
This same weekend.
Fine, but I wasn't listening.
This is anxious about we can talk more about it.
perfectly valid lifestyle.
Or drive
So good, we beat this week.
Ski resorts, a big package.
Did you get done with things go
So what is the licensing status? You should probably do it.
That's a wallet.
cameras.
Oh, shut up. Oh, it's competition. Travis's wife makes this.
Okay, so two things that we're seeing coming around that we just want to give you a heads up for. Enterprise, so I know that we got lots of interesting things going on with Enterprise. As an agency, we've been kind of, the payments have been going out spottily, and so Enterprise is not being kind to you when you're renting vehicles, and we understand that. So we're trying to make sure that that gets solved. But the thing that we're seeing is that they're flipping up and maybe giving you upgrades when you're renting a car. If they offer you a different vehicle than you've rented, please confirm with them that they're not charging you anymore for that upgrade. And I would say historically that hasn't been the case until recently, and they are doing that. And understand that's an exception memo if you get a vehicle that's not compact. So to help us all so that that doesn't keep happening, just make sure that you have a clear understanding of what they're doing when you're at that office, so that there's no surprises on the back end when the invoices come in. Okay, anybody got questions about that?
So our responsibility is that they say, want the Ford truck or the Camry? You say, I need a compact car.
There we go.
And then they can say, oh, we'll give it to you for free. Great, make sure they've denoted that in your rental record.
I
We
get
had someone
that
almost
in
go to
writing.
collections for this, so I really am trying to prevent you from stress around this. You need to be clear about what we can do. We can do what kind of car?
Compact.
If they give you something bigger, awesome, but they need to denote that they are giving it to you at the compact rate. Otherwise, the bill can sit and then they eventually come to you for payment. So that's not a comfortable place to be and puts you in an uncomfortable space where you're like, well, should I just pay it so I don't get put in collections? But it's not your responsibility if we're doing things right. So your biggest thing is to tell them clearly, compact car. And if they want to upgrade you, great, but they need to make sure that's in the agreement. Yes.
And the other thing that we did find out thinking of that is that you rent a car, yeah, I'm gonna pick on you because I just saw you, and then you send someone else to pick it up for you. Suddenly you're off the reservation and the person that picked it up is now on the reservation. So that creates a problem too. So make sure that if you're renting it, you pick it up. They will bring the vehicle here if that works for you. And then you can sign off on it as well. If you need additional drivers, make sure you put additional drivers down. And then the other thing is that if you're renting the car, you're the only one that can pay gas for the car. No one else can be kind and pay it for you, because that causes issues on the back end as well. So just make sure that that line stays exactly the same, okay?
So let me clarify just to make sure.
Yes.
Like when I would rent cars, Norley would put both our names on so she could pick it up and then it wasn't a problem. Is that still okay?
I believe so, as long as she's the additional driver. We have seen it where that didn't happen and then it flipped completely and then that became the issue. So if that's the secret to the game, make sure you put both of you as
Like if your
drivers.
sister's gonna pick it up for you, or they're gonna come bring the car and then they're gonna drive the person back. Sometimes it's a nice service. Norley did it for me many times, but we were both on the agreement. That way she could do it and it wasn't a problem. Because when they pick it up, they wanna see your ID.
Yeah.
And so that is the issue.
I did that with Jeannie as well a couple times.
And you just make sure both of you were on.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the secret. So that's what we needed to find out. Thank you, that is really helpful. Any other questions on Enterprise? Because I know it just is not a fun thing right now. It's not fun for us either. We're trying to make sure that those bills go out regularly, but they just kind of end up floating, and now Enterprise is not happy with us, and so that's why they're clamping down on you guys, which I'm sorry for. Okay. The second thing, as far as invoices, we have delegation lists that came out about a month and a half ago. Maybe it was at the 1st of January-ish. And so Jennifer has to sign off on every invoice. So please make sure that before you pass it on to us that Jennifer's signing off on it. If Jennifer is not here, then Todd can sign off on it. Those are the two signatures that have to be on the documents, or else we can't process them and we'll be passing them back to get Jennifer's signature. So just to save you frustration and time, know that that's how that signature chain has to go.
And I don't sign them until the specialist has signed them to say that this work has been done. Mine is, I have to sign them, but it's also it's been interesting signing every invoice to see what we're spending money on.
And there's a lot of them.
There are. One day I had a job this high. So just know, like, happy to do it, but I do have to sign first because I want you to know better if the project has actually been completed. Another thing that came, I was getting C7s to be okay to pay, but the service isn't done yet. I'm not signing them until the service is done. So don't give them to me early to be ahead of the game. I appreciate you trying to be like on it, so when it is done, you can submit them. But when I sign it, it means the job is done. Please pay these people. It doesn't mean the job will be done. It means that it's done. So just for your own like well-being, don't give it to me until it's actually the work is completed. Okay. I appreciate us trying to get ahead of things, but I really don't feel comfortable signing off on work that's not completed.
Anybody got any questions about that? Yes, ma'am. Invoices and C7s are all paper-based, and to get them to you to sign, we give you paper. All electronic.
Not yet. They're working on that in finance. So.
Like this is paper. And when you did that, I thought, oh.
I have lots of paper. It's fine. I get lots of practice. My signature is great. Super fast.
Yeah, so right now we're paper. Those were the two things that we had. Oh, Todd?
This is more for Jennifer. Jennifer, can you just clarify when you would like me to sign to the group? Meaning it like you're gone to a meeting versus you're on vacation and what that looks like.
When I'm gone more than 2 days, you can give it to Todd. Otherwise, it can wait. It's not Todd's responsibility to sign everything when I'm gone. There are very few things that are urgent. I think Pam had an urgent one on Friday, and I was out, and she's like, hey, I need this one signed. My computer wouldn't sign it. So I said, go ahead and give it to Todd. I make that designation, that's fine. But for you to supersede and just go to Todd and harass him every time I'm gone, it doesn't really help Todd out. So we're really just waiting. I know you don't like to wait, but to some level, I'm not gone usually that long. If I'm on vacation, we will let you know, and it just goes straight to Todd. Like I'm going to Portugal in April, it will go to Todd, okay, while I'm gone. Okay? And if it's a day out, it's gonna be okay. And it really stressed people out why I was gone for a day, because Todd's like, am I supposed to sign these? And I get them via email and you're giving them to Todd, which then gets dual signatures and it's problematic. So just give them to one. If I'm not gonna be there, Karen can tell you Todd's on deck, okay? And we can get that taken care of. I don't wanna like stalemate you, but usually a day is not gonna be a huge deal. I do come in when I'm out of the office to make sure I get the signatures done so you won't have to wait. So.
Else have any other issues for us that we need to? Audra, no issues.
Issue.
Yeah, we are an issue. I understand that.
I'm trying to calm her. I'm
Thank you.
trying. I'm doing my best.
Thank you, Diane.
Anything else?
We're good? Okay, thank
Okay,
you.
thanks.
All right, this is time for transitions. So if you're on the standards, quality instruction, or licensing team, I need you to stay. Otherwise, you're welcome to head out, or you can stay if you're interested in the future endorsement conversation. Wow, we have a lot of interest. Excellent. Let's continue on. All right, so as you've been. Oh, wait. As we've been venturing in the licensing space and kind of changing from our previous practice to the associate and professional license and LEA specific, we've kind of encountered some feedback from the field that is probably time to be responsive to. So currently we have lots of endorsements, some that are required to teach particular topics and some that are just like, hey, look, I have additional knowledge that makes me a more skilled professional. Moving forward, we are kind of getting into a space that we need to start taking on reforming our endorsements and transforming them into kind of current practice. And I think the instructional coaching endorsement that Erica helped to develop and showcase with you last month is a good example of the future of endorsements. Also, any of you that have already had some competency-based pieces in your endorsements, probably a good space to keep heading towards. We're at a time that the LEAs are saying, why do they need so much content? And as I dig in, and we have some more data coming on a few additional endorsements in the next couple of weeks, our data doesn't show someone who has an endorsement is any more effective at teaching than those that don't. And so to some level, that gives me pause to think, what are our endorsements doing that aren't causing better effective teaching? And so just having content is not sufficient, right? Pedagogy is part of the equation. But currently, to get licensed, we don't do a whole lot in the pedagogy space for our associates. They'll go through some basic courses, but our expectations for content are pretty significant. I think and somebody in the room will be able to tell me how wrong I am, but secondary ELA, I believe, is 30 credits. And when I look at it, because I've had to approve some why we haven't had staff, it's a ridiculous course load that I don't think is really needed. I'm going to be honest with you. I think we went kind of like, ooh, we want the highest rigor ever, and I don't really think that's really getting us what we need out of our systems. And so in the next several months during staff meeting, we'll start to have some conversations about digging into our endorsements and thinking about what is the rigorous but minimum qualifications a teacher needs if this endorsement is required to teach something that you can actually validate that it has impact. Because right now, I think we'd have a hard time justifying that because I have a certain endorsement, I am better qualified to teach this content class, and that is what our LEAs are pushing back on. And it's not just our rules. Our rules are going to be more impacted by the licensing changes in that if they want to run their own preparation programs, which many of them are taking on that challenge more than I think we anticipated. Even Davis, who's taking that on, is a little fiery about our endorsement requirements for content. And so as we move forward, we'll start having conversations around what is the content test that makes sense? Does that test continue to make sense? Is our cut score rigorous enough? Would you feel better if the cut score was higher and less course requirements were needed? These are the kind of things that I really want us to start thinking differently about what could be versus what is. What is not going to be able to sustain in a way that is actually going to be helpful for the field. And so as we move forward, I'm going to need some really innovative thinking around what endorsements could look like that still provide the content knowledge you believe teachers need to have to be successful in teaching that area, but also allow teachers to demonstrate that they have that knowledge in maybe non-traditional ways, that they may not have gone through a traditional preparation program to earn that endorsement. Kathy?
It would help me if I understand sort of the historical piece, and I think I get the moving forward, but I'm thinking, and Travis, you can probably help, but the 30 hours because of highly qualified, didn't we sort of have a major equivalency sort of unwritten or maybe even written rule?
So it's complicated. But yes, there was a designation of highly qualified saying you had to have a major equivalent, which was the 30 semesters. That's where that came from, or pass an appropriate test. Utah's board back in 2003 with No Child Left Behind said, we believe the tests are valuable, but coursework is also valued. So they had it as an and, whereas some other states had simply made it an or. You have courses or you take the test. And so we've always struggled in that a little bit. I think as we're moving forward, one of the things we have to think about is, this is one of those things where just like your student standards, you need to be doing this with a committee. That your content committee should be coming to decisions about endorsement requirements in the same way we do for student standards. And one of the problems that we're talking about is, like Jennifer said, we need to know the minimum. A license is the minimum that a person needs to do no harm. That's the point of a license. We've also used endorsements as guidance to universities in what they should do. Those two things aren't necessarily the same. So as we're moving forward, we need to think about how can we still provide guidance to our universities to fill out those math majors who are the Cadillac of math teachers. Sorry, I'm biased.
Right.
But at the same time saying, look, this is the Cadillac, this is the car that can get you to and from work. And so we need to be able to work in both of those spaces. That's going to be a tricky balance. And if you're trying to do that by yourself, you are so open for attack. And that's what the purpose of the committee is, to really protect you and to help make those
in
keys.
that vein, we'll have some internal discussions so we get on a similar page. but ultimately you will want to bring in content experts
Yes, sorry,
to have those
yes.
discussions. So
Those-
it's going to
those-
be both, right?
Those two purposes of the endorsement are, that's really,
Helpful, right?
that's really key, I think.
I think that's where LEAs are struggling as we take away APT and change ARL, and not take away, but we are amending for better practice. They aren't seeing this need for this huge content. They have teachers, they say that are working great, and they don't have all of that background. And their student outcomes are good, their student surveys about their rapport with kids is great. Like, if student learning is good and students are liking their teacher, if outcomes are what we're here about learning. I think that's what most of you are here to try and improve. If that's already happening without having the content, we're having challenges from the LAs of getting behind this amount of content courses that maybe we made up for particular rules back in No Child Left Behind days. We're no longer in that shadow. We are in a space that we can really innovate and be thoughtful about what does it look like. And so we'll take this on in the next couple of months. I want to just give you kind of planting seeds to start thinking about it. We probably won't start talking about it in our group until May, but just kind of getting your head wrapped around it, maybe thinking about what do other states do in this space that might be in more of a competency blended approach with courses, with test taking. What are maybe some multiple ways to learn this? If we only have one pathway, the LEAs are going to push and we're going to get law that says you don't need to be licensed to be a teacher. And that's not a space I'd really like to head, but that's ultimately what this has come to a head on, is that the LEAs have enough confidence in us to figure this out in the next year. But if we don't figure it out, they will figure it out in a way that is legislated. And I'd rather us figure it out so that we are getting the kind of teachers we need without losing total control over that. There are some basic parameters we would like teachers to have in our content areas.
It's okay to be a Pinto instead of a Cadillac.
Yes. You got it. Still get you there. Maybe not pretty, but it'll get you there.
Hey.
I just want to make sure, so speaking of math, where there are multiple levels, so when we went through this a couple of years ago, we actually did streamline and talk about things with the level 2 math endorsement and the level 3 math endorsement and the special ed math endorsement. But the level 4, when we went to remove, Travis, you were the one who shared had to be equivalent to the highest level endorsement. Are we saying that that is not the case any longer?
That was inaccurate. That was an opinion of mine.
It was a bias, explicit bias. In board rule, there's, at least from my knowledge, there's nothing in there about this specific.
There was, okay, so there used to
Now.
be. There used to be language that said
Okay.
it had to be equivalent to a content degree, a non-education content degree in the same area. That language is not in the new system.
So we'll do some kind of prepping you with what the board rule requires to start, like what's the minimum that we have to attach. But I'm going to tell you, there are no numbers from what I've seen of requirements. So thinking differently is what I'm going to kind of ask you to start ruminating around. Like, how do we do this differently that still gets us qualified teachers, but in a pathway that's acceptable? If you have a teacher that's coming in with no background, they don't have an English endorsement, an English major or minor, but they want to teach, they shouldn't have to spend $20,000 to do so. And so we've got to figure out this balance of how do we get them ready without burdening them. Why would I come into education if you're going to make me go take all these classes? Because you can imagine the first few years of teaching are rigorous, if you remember those days, let alone having to take coursework after hours, which at this point is difficult to find in the States. Finding courses that aren't during the school day after work is not really a thing in a lot of your content areas. And so if you want to keep requiring some courses, we're going to have to do a better job offering some of those courses for teachers outside of the school day. So just really a lot to think through, and the only reason I'm planning this now is because if it were me, I need some time to kind of get behind and think about this before Director Thronson takes me through like revising my endorsement. Okay, so planting seeds, Crystal.
We need to remember concurrent enrollment. Exceptions, but they are still requiring. I think it's now rule as last year that they have to have a master's, so that's something to.
I mean, if they want to teach those courses, then that's a part we have no control over because it's legislated. Sarah?
Thinking forward, knowing that multiple people, like Jolie was stating, have multiple endorsements, will the expectation be to start with one or that they will all happen at the same time?
They all need to be done by next spring. So
Thank you.
These will all have to be rolled out because basically what we've had to do with our people that want to have their own teacher preparation programs is say focus on the pedagogy while we figure out content. because they were freaking out about pedagogy and content. They're good with our pedagogical requirements. They understand teachers need classroom management, instructional design, and those pieces, but they don't agree with our content expectations. And thus there was some headbutting, I guess would be a good word for it, that we prevented a legislative just whoever wants to teach can come teach, which would have happened, by saying we will work with you to get to a happy space, but you're going to have to give us some time. And in lieu of that, you're going to focus on pedagogy while we figure out content, and we'll have content for you in the spring. And then they can figure out what that looks like for them moving forward. But the LEAs, big and small, have the same discrepancy on this issue. They do not agree with our content requirements, and so we need to figure out what that could look like moving forward. Yeah.
No, I have the ed tech endorsement, which is one of those sort of value add endorsements. When we first started the endorsement, there was sort of the one path through the endorsement, and I had a district at that point that came to me and he said, your endorsement's nice, but it really doesn't meet my needs for what I need. What if I was to be able to come up with something similar to it, but as rigorous? Would you authorize that? I did, because he came up, and he's probably harder on the requirements of what they do than what I might have required. But I have probably 15 different pathways to that same endorsement based on local needs, because they know what they need.
Yep. Well, and that's where some of the flexibility is helpful as well. And so we can look at what we currently have. Kathy has a good one in the arts, thinking about that demonstrated competency, but we don't have the time. For English, if I was still in that area, I don't have the time to go check every English teacher on an APT to see if they're qualified. So we could put in some parameters that allow somebody else to check for those qualifications. That the LEAs would still like some support with reviewing applications, so we will continue that work that we've been doing for years. It's not going to change our work. The expectation initially, tell me if I'm wrong, was that they would do that, but they would still like our support. They're like, we're not experts in all the content areas. It's hard for us to make some of those judgment calls. So many of them will still seek support in that way.
One of the things that I'm constantly talking to potential educators about is what happens once they get a license here, regardless of what method they do it. Of course, a university program is going to lock them down. They're going to get a license, and that license is going to have portability. But one of the concerns is with the way our alternative pathway is going to be managed outside of our control necessarily. Is that going to be reviewed later when somebody leaves the state, that Utah rips them off because they give you a license, it's not really a good license, and they're going to make me go back to school someplace else because we hit below the minimum? So
we have to be careful. We want portability. We have enough military coming in and out of the state. We can't be a state that people saying, oh, that's too low of a bar. We're not going to take a Utah license. So we have to be really delicate in this work, but just starting to kind of think about it, giving you some time to just process, and then as we move forward, we can figure out as a group what this looks like. With some flexibility, the big idea for me is that we have multiple pathways into achieving those content requirements that you land on. That there's not just one way, I have to take this course, but what other ways can I show competency in that area or do some other related behavior to kind of get that competency. Okay. All right, I am going to move on for the sake of time. We got 5 minutes behind waiting for finance, so we're going to keep going. If you do not, licensing, this one's probably not too relevant to you, so this is probably your turn to exit unless you'd like to stay. Let's give you a minute of transition. And I think...
What's the next one?
PCCR. And Nate, I know what CCR means, but P? Plan for college and career readiness.
It's related.
Okay.
Coldwater clearance cold water revival.
Credence.
It's really unfortunate because I was really ready to get down.
Get rocking.
Good morning. I am not the school counseling specialist, but unfortunately Kim wasn't able to be here today, so I'm going to take a few minutes to make a request that Kim has connected to the counseling universe and ultimately related to the PCCR. PCCR stands for the Plan for College and Career Readiness. They decided not to make the acronym the CCRP or CCRAP because of obvious reasons. That's for everyone else. What Kim asked me the only reason I'm involved here is because of the work that we've done in the early college space over the last couple of years as a kind of connection piece with the counseling community. And so ultimately the lens that I would be appreciative that you consider as I talk for the next 2 minutes is what projects are you working on that counselors would benefit from knowing about? So at the end of this short story, I'm going to ask for everyone to jump into a Google form. If there's any projects that kind of overlap with the counseling space, either that counselors would benefit from knowing about so that they can work with students, and so the plan for college and career readiness may be a space or like a vehicle for that, but it could also be just kind of general awareness for counselors in their work with students connected to T&L ongoing. Does that idea make sense?
Notes.
Great. So, a couple of years back, the Utah State Board of Education was made aware of a couple of things, and the data at that time looked a little bit different, obviously, because a couple of years ago it was 2017 and not 2020. However, we have seen very similar data since that time. And so what the board was made aware of was that we're seeing a pretty explosive growth in concurrent enrollment credits earned by year. And so between 2017 and 2020, we saw the number of concurrent enrollments credits earned across the state increase by over 50%, which is kind of gigantic. In line with that, 3 out of 4 concurrent enrollment credits earned are earned in highly transferable courses. So this means that the credits the students are earning within their high school experiences are in general ed requirements about 75% of the time, that no matter which major they decide to pursue, they'll have the opportunity to use those credits for graduation. This has been especially true within the kind of mathematics space, and you can see that same explosive growth over the last few years within mathematics. But in addition to that explosive growth, what we've seen is a shift in our QL courses. QL stands for quantitative literacy, and it's the math expectation that different degrees have in order to graduate. And so we have 3 pathways that are established in higher ed, 1030, 1040, and 1050. And what you can see during this time is not only are the number of credits earned going up, but we're also seeing a more diverse use of the 1030, 1040, and 1050 ecosystem. I won't talk about calculus as king, but basically this is data suggesting that our students are choosing math courses that are more aligned with their interests and study areas. So the board said, what's the issue? It sounds like everything's going great within concurrent. Students have a 95% passage rate within this space, and the number of credits that students are earning is going up. So what the issue is that there's only students of particular student groups are having considerably higher opportunities within concurrent enrollment than in other student groups. And so we see this circumstance in race and ethnicity. What you can see manifested in these lines is opportunity gaps. The lower lines are students that are non-white or non-Asian. The upper lines are white and Asian students. And depending on your race and ethnicity, you are between 15 and 32% less likely to enroll in an AP and IB or a CE course at some point during your high school career. We see the same trends within low-income EL and students receiving special ed services. The gaps are also pretty similar. 30% in the case of students receiving special ed services, but low income to non-low income, we're looking at almost a 20% gap here as well. And so this was the impetus for the board stepping in and saying we need to do something in order to close these gaps. What does this have to do with counseling? As it turns out, the solutions that our community across the state came up with related to counseling in a number of ways. So the PCCR process was shifted such that early college coursework is recommended for students as an opt-in course and not as a kind of selecting course. There are communities across the state that were looking at AP courses as a kind of honors track or a track that's only appropriate for some students, whereas AP courses by their nature are opt-in courses, meaning any student that's willing to put in the rigor necessary or put in the work necessary to meet the rigor requirements has the opportunity to participate. We also saw course prerequisites as a barrier for these student groups being able to enter, and so these have been undone with a board rule that we passed in August. And then we're also seeing communities across the state and their tracking practices that put students on remedial tracks, gen ed tracks, and honors tracks that end up with a number of students not having an opportunity by the time they graduate to take these courses. And so the reason Kim wanted me to share this quick overview of what we've done over the past couple of years in the early college space is because we require the counseling community to be on board with the shifts that we're making in order to make these things happen. And so what I would be appreciative of you considering is what projects are you working on that if you have the buy-in and the collaboration of the counseling community, in what way, both what are those projects and in what ways do you need counselors' help? What awareness do you need counselors to have and what do you need them to do? So there's a Google form at this bit.ly at TNL Counsel. I'm not a very good speller. I hope that I spelled counseling, the root word of counseling, correctly. Looking at Sarah Whipple.
That's correct. I won't judge you.
Do I spell it wrong? No. Okay, great. This is a circumstance in which I would appreciate our own Joey Honey to share maybe a 1-minute summary of CBMS. Another circumstance that is kind of applicable to this.
Yes, so my 1-minute share out would be, in the case of mathematics, we've created a pathways committee that includes people from higher ed and public ed and have pulled stakeholders from like lots of different groups. So rural areas, more popular areas. We also have administrators and directors and other people from education that are all part of this group that are talking about how do we help counselors, students, administrators, parents, all the stakeholders in helping students identify what is the best math course for them to take when they are finished with Math 1, 2, and 3. Because there's been this big rush to, oh, it's all about going to 1050 or calculus. And so and there's 3 major areas that we're focusing on, but one of them is connected specifically to this. And it is about how to help students identify their best pathway based on their interest, as opposed to it being, that's the only one you want me to talk about.
Yeah, that's totally great. And so Joey, if you wouldn't mind including that in here, I'm sure Kim, I know Kim has mentioned that, so she is aware, but it would be useful just to have that on the list. Other initiatives that are going on right now, there's a Utah Prime conversation surrounding a number of levels that students can earn based on exploring CTE and early college coursework that allows them to have some achievement within multiple levels. So this Utah Prime initiative is one that would be connected to this. And then there's also an EL SEAL. I'm not sure who to look at.
SEAL by literacy.
Would you mind taking a minute to talk about what that biliteracy SEAL?
SEAL of biliteracy, it is a recognition of students who can pass a system of assessments, both in English and a second language, that at a certain level, then they are able to get the seal of biliteracy once they graduate. It's put on electronically on their transcript here at the state. Each district's SIS system, they can click that and award that to us, but the districts do the processing of the assessments for that.
Awesome. And so there's tracks for those that have English as their first language, and there's also tracks for those that have some other language as their first language.
That's correct.
Arriving at this kind of biliteracy space. Great. So just a few examples of things that the counseling community would benefit from knowing. What am I, 10:45? Is that what I'm shooting for? So if you could take the next few minutes, think about your own ecosystems and identify any overlap that you have. Even if you think it's ephemeral, like Kim can make that decision for her team when she gets it. So anything that kind of connects to this space, I think that she would benefit from. I am also a conduit for this message, so I'm just doing my best to say what I think she would say.
How detailed would you like this project description and what I want counselors to know?
I would say pretty minimal, like a paragraph at the most. Just make sure you include your name and email, and if Kim has additional questions, she can reach out, set up a meeting, etc. Jen?
Are there examples of things that you're looking for at elementary versus secondary? Because all of the examples are secondary, so I'm having a hard time thinking of what would be relevant in my role.
If Kim was here, she would have a great answer. It sounds like, or it looks like, there are a lot of people that might have.
I don't have an answer. I have a comment about the importance of the elementary piece, because you talked about some of the challenges of tracking and blah, blah, blah. That happens preschool. So it seems like best advice to counselors and us in the content areas is to be very proactive, very young.
Some of your gifted initiatives might be identification procedures and tracking conversations in this.
And so Shannon, Kim did share with me a percentage of time that counselors spend on various topics that shifts based on the grade bands. And so maybe that would be useful. I can send it out to everyone when I sit down in just a second. That will help you maybe understand what counselors consider their roles, primary roles to be in the elementary space.
On dual language immersion, it's meant for all kids, not meant to be a track system, some really get it and some don't.
I have kind of a dumb question, but which Kim are we talking about?
Kim Herrera.
Okay.
Yep. She is the school counseling specialist upstairs. That's close. No other questions? Minute. So if it doesn't start talking.
Well, for example, can I give an example?
Putting things in the Google form. Sorry.
So there was a big furor around the idea that world languages were not required for Regent scholarships anymore, so there was kind of an exodus out of world language courses. That is not the case. And so there's a lot of misinformation out with counselors. And so I just submitted that for Kim to maybe look at that and say, yes, Regent Scholar does still require two years of world languages. It just changed. The only thing that changed was they don't have to be sequential.
Awesome.
So those are the kinds of things, yeah. Ta-da.
Next hurdle is consistency across institutions and their acceptance of.
Right. Good news about that is the IHEs just met about AP credit.
Friday.
Consistent, yeah. It sounded like the art group was the highest achievers, and all the other ones struggled. The art team seemed to do pretty well.
Did they really? I'm surprised, because last time I met with them, they were, no, not at our place, we, blah, blah, blah.
And just what I have you, prerequisites are no longer allowable for getting into AP or for enrollment classes. So as you're out in the space and people are saying, is that true? Or that you hear prerequisites, please remind them that those are no longer allowed. So summer reading lists, a pretest the first couple of weeks of the course. There are ways that teachers are discouraging participation for students that we're trying to prevent, but they will find new ways that we'll continue to have conversations around. It's meant to, if the kid wants to do it, let the kid try, and maybe you might have to give them some support, but that's okay. That's our job. So just trying to get that message out. I've had a few counselors reach out and say, is it true? I'm like, yeah, it's true, so stop it. And so it's been a long-standing practice. If any of you taught secondary, it's pretty common, and so just trying to work that out. And even middle school, getting into middle school, honors English, what you have to do to get into that, It's no longer the pathway. If a kid wants to go for it, go for it. Let's know that as a teacher, I might have to provide some support, but the goal is for kids to be successful in whatever course they take, so.
Did you see that, please?
Wait a second. Are you saying that junior high honors are not determined by test taking?
They're not supposed to have prerequisites any longer. So like in Canyons, years ago, we took on the premise of whoever wants in can be in.
Right.
And so there's not a test to get into honors. You
And
just
in schools to watch, we did that as well.
Right, like it's a common practice for those that believe in equity versus just one metric to get you in, or multiple metrics, like gifted education is always a fun one. Like we have
Grandson, Alpine District, Saturday testing.
I think the rule, remind me, Nate and Shannon, the rule prevents it for AP, IB, CE. Does it prevent it for the gifted track as well? Honors courses.
So the language surrounding the gifted track is in identification. And all students should have access to the opportunity to be identified as gifted. It is framed differently in that space.
We're having lots of questions come up about honors because traditionally they're not like a gifted program or an AP program. They're just things that districts create because they want to. And so as our new application became available for gifted funds, a lot of questions came up about can I use this for honors? And our answer has been yes, if like you meet all of these requirements in the board rule for gifted and talented, meaning like there's multiple measures for identification, they're unbiased measures, things like that.
So can they have prerequisites to get into honors?
Not if
They
they use gifted and talented money. Well, and prerequisites specifically listed in the board rule.
Yeah, true. It is a defined list.
And I think it's important too to distinguish between prerequisites of like the hoop jumping. Like you don't have to have a B average. That was a thing. You have to have a B, and you have to have this, and you have to like all these things to be able to do that. But it also is being careful not to talk about like a prerequisite is also that you want to make sure you have content.
Right, like math 1 to math 2, like those
Right.
types of things are still the flow versus I have to have taken honors English to get into AP English. No, you don't. Those types of things, like the sequence, like if a CE requirement is you take this course before you take the CE, that is still a requirement.
You don't have to have 8th grade honors math to take math 1 honors math. Like those things are not like if you opt in if you want to take that class and that's the area that you are wanting to focus on.
Right.
Yeah. So you probably should not sign up for AP calculus as an 8th grader.
Probably not. Our data's showing that's not working. All right. So just some things just for your own knowledge. This will be, as the rule gets more noticed, I mean, it's been almost 9 months, but this is the time of year where they start putting schedules and stuff out. We got more and more calls over the last few months, so you might just hear it out in the field once in a while. All right, the next step, and this is for the standards team solely or those interested, so if this is not you, you may walk away. This should be a fun conversation that I look forward to being done with after today. I thought we were done a few months ago, 6 months ago in fact, but we are back to this need. So standards implementation support guide is what we wanted to call. The board said no, it is called the core guide. So just know I tried to change the name and they said no. It is a core guide moving forward. In your files for today, you might need to refresh, I just dropped a bunch in, is draft 7. I've gone to the board 6 months in a row on this core guide. I am done with it. I'm not going back, my friends. It is coming to full board next month, and I'm hoping to be done with this. It has been quite a process that you have all been impacted by as well. So this is where we are, where we've landed. The only thing that changes in draft 7, you'll see that's not on this version, is that if the board complaints that we get on the core guides will go to the board for review. So just know if somebody sends in a complaint to the board, the committee will take a look at those complaints. Todd?
Step 2, develop standards implementation support guide or develop core?
Don't worry, the version should be core guide everywhere. I've had to revise this thing so many times.
So every place that is.
Every place that says anything that might not be core guide, it should be core guide. So I'll check the final version that we're on. It's been changed, like I said, draft 7. We've changed it many, many times, and it's been fun. So In terms of the section that we're looking at that we agreed to 6 months ago were these areas of elements. And so those are the things that are in the rule or the policy piece here that's going forward to full board for the 3rd time in March. And so the issue that I've been brought to is that as people are going to execute these, they're struggling to stay within the requirements. And so I wanted to have the group kind of problem solve around those issues to see if we can come to some resolution that I don't need to come back to every 6 months to resolve. So we're gonna come up with a final solution today because I need to move on. I have other things to do than the core guide, so, and you all do as well. So in the Dropbox, I don't need to worry about the standards. In our Google Drive, there are different samples from different content areas that have been trying to play in this space. So you'll see a science one, you'll see a kindergarten health one, and then some comments from Sarah from her review of the core guide template that I just thought this is the time to kind of get all of it out and see what we can do to kind of move forward so that we're all kind of there. So you'll have the science version here, which doesn't align with the current elements, and then you've got the...
Well, I think, Jennifer, part of the thing is the criteria says that these elements are included. It doesn't say they have to be listed exactly like that. And I wonder if that's where some of the confusion's coming in.
Okay, yeah, and that's one thing, as we look at the elements that are required, that we said those would be the things we would do, keep in mind, if you can frame whatever you're trying to do under that, then it still works. So if, for like NGSS, they have some additional principles and practices that they want to include, well, maybe that goes under concept skills to master critical background knowledge. It just needs to be under those headers. So you can have some flexibility and variability inside of this tool, but these are the headers that we're working with. At least
I
that's
think
where
that
we're
was the confusion,
Okay.
because it just says that these elements are included. It doesn't say these have to be the headers. So I think that's the confusion, because I know that the science writing team said, oh yeah, we've included these in, they just didn't call them that. So I think then you just go and you put that header at the top.
And it's not, yeah,
And it's not a big
as
deal.
I was looking at them, they all possess the same elements. Something you can't have are links. There are no links. You cannot reference them to anywhere else. The document is a static document with no links. So, for example, I think in science you had a couple, those have to go.
Yeah, that's fine.
The board has weighed in, we are not putting links. If you want to put links, put them on UEN and don't tell anyone about it. I'm kind of at that point of like, we are here to support teachers, and I know that supporting teachers requires maybe sharing best practices of like key lessons and resources that might be helpful to build knowledge. That is not what the core guide is for. UEN is for that. Feel free to create your resources on UEN. It is not, the state board doesn't have to be supportive because it's not on the state board website. These often go on our website, so they feel like anything we put on, they need to have full approval of, and thus you can put critical background knowledge and type in things you want people to know, but linking them to the key resource that you might have referenced them to might be somewhere else on UEN.
The big, I mean, like I said, I don't see a problem with just calling them those headers. I think that was just a miscommunication.
Okay.
But the big issue is really the layout of the format. For not all content areas does it work to have the boxes the way they're laid out. Can they be laid out different ways to better meet the needs of the content? Some have a box that might need a bigger area and it's over on the side in a little box. That's just not going to work. So if you use the same headers, do they all have to be laid out in the same layout, or just include the same headers? I guess is maybe a bigger question.
This is Jody. So Jody has, it's not like science, if you look at the science one, has a lot more on a page for one standard than maybe the health and PE for various reasons and their own needs. But fitting things in is a challenge. And so when we actually had this discussion, the issue that I see is for your elementary teachers who get 3, 4 core guides and have to learn to read each one differently, is really not best practice for us to show that we can't unify around a freaking template. I apologize, but I'm kind of like seriously frustrated over this because at some point this is just a document that's meant to help teachers. And if we can't help ourselves figure out how to get a tool that works for all of us, then I'm happy to figure out what that template looks like. But I'd hate for Jody and Melissa to have to keep going down this path of like, now I've got to figure out how to make it work in this template. Maybe there's a good middle ground. Like, I am flexible what this looks like, but I want to come to a solution that I don't need to come back to you in 6 months and say, here we are again. When preschool, I know you guys aren't doing it, but I'm going to pretend you are, or when Robert goes to do social studies. Like, at what point can we come together and figure out one template that, yes, the box size is going to be bigger or smaller because of the content that you're in, and maybe for the standard even it's bigger or smaller because that standard is more robust. But that the elements and the general layout are the same, because if I am an elementary teacher, which I was for a bit of time, as well as a middle school teacher, I have 4 of these core guides looking at me every day. It's unfair. It just puts a little disadvantage for elementary teachers by saying, now I have to figure out how math does it, because math was done originally, how health is doing it now, and now I've got science, and social studies is coming, right? Like, I just feel the disadvantage for teachers, so that's the voice that I'm speaking from. Kathy.
I do not want to add to your frustration.
Feel free. It's not. I want to
need
verbalize my frustration so you know where I'm coming from. But ultimately, I just want us to come to a solution that works for the team. I don't create a core guide. I don't really care. I just want teachers to have a tool that's easily accessible for them and gives them the information you want to give them in a format that we can get behind, that is somewhat consistent, so that teachers aren't having to figure it out each and every time they go to a core guide.
I need some remediation. I'm so sorry. We got to a place a few months ago that we said that this was a tool or a standards-based thing for all of the courses that were in the second column. Is that still the case?
This is not that at all. Different ideas.
Okay.
So you're talking supplemental standards, the middle column. This is like core guide, so mathematics.
Okay, this is the teacher helps.
You got it.
I thought those two things were interrelated some way.
No, they're, in my mind, I mean, it could be. You could have a core guide for a supplemental course, but I would probably not. On other things.
Okay.
Jody?
I have one specific question and then just kind of a comment. I'm also really frustrated because this is like the 10th time that I've had to redo these. So I would very much like to have a final, like, can I just be freaking done?
I know.
I don't care what the hell it looks like. Can we just be done? I'm so over it. Okay, my specific question though, I do have a hyperlink. It's the same one on all of them, but it's the board approved vocabulary document that they needed to see my vocabulary, which was ridiculous.
Fine, because it's in your
Okay.
standards. But
It's not in the standards. It's a separate document so that it can be changed, but they needed to approve the words I use.
Is that
Yes.
then it's fine. If it's
Okay.
something the board has already approved and is good,
Okay.
I would not put links in there. You were drawing yourself to some kind of
Oh no,
feedback.
I've deleted every stinking link.
And Jody had pages of links before. Gone.
I'm wondering if a simple fix is just list the boxes vertically instead of having some horizontal. That way they can be smaller or bigger as needed. I mean, I think that might, yeah, and I mean, okay, so we
That's
system.
math is, if I remember
That was my question. I'm not trying to say like we should do it exactly how math is done, but I thought months ago we said they were already done for math, and math had all the components besides like adding the exemplar where models were, and that we were just using that. So I'm a little caught off guard where all these like templates and feedback are coming from, because I thought months ago we said like math already had them. Why aren't we just using that? So
and the board has said, don't worry, math. You don't have to redo yours.
Right. Right, but I'm just thinking moving forward, because yeah.
Yeah, well, I think the way that yours are set up, if I remember right, they are just what Melissa suggested.
Yeah, the only like split column is like related standards, current and future grades, which it just lists the standards, but everything else it's like the standard, the concepts and skills to master, the related, the critical background, the vocabulary, and then the assessment could go below that.
Pull yours up so we can, you guys can Google as well, but math core. She's talking about this split with the current grade versus future grades is split. Then these are parts that we don't have in the documents and on.
Right, and so assessment could just go there instead.
Yeah, and what I think Ricky asked for feedback on, can we release it without all the parts? The whole reason for the parts is that that's what people are asking for. So if you can't, if we can't come up with some of the parts, then we're asking all of our teachers to do it. I think that's saying if USBE can't even come up with answers or examples, how are we expecting 2,000, 6,000, 20,000 teachers to come up with examples? I I worry that if we can't produce it, we're asking our teachers to do it independently. Seems an oxymoron to me. So just something to kind of think about is if you can't produce it, then we either need to reduce the list and not support the LEAs and the things that they asked for, or we need to produce what's on the list. Lots of things that I just want to get done today. Jolie?
I think Ricky's point with that was not about USB not being able to do it. I think it was more of a time, because teachers do want it now and have this conversation. And for subject areas who have not had this, I think this will be really awesome. My comment is in appreciating that if I'm an elementary teacher, what can I do so that I look at something and I can see consistency across? And I think that's important, but I also think that, when I say not all standards are created equally, I am going to say that the health standards are extremely clear. And if you are teaching elementary health, it pretty much tells you exactly what you need to do within the standard. And while someone who has a degree in math can tell you that I can tell you exactly what needs to be done with this standard in first grade, and Shannon can tell you all kinds of things around that. Our first grade teachers, it's not. So the reason I bring that up, and I think that's important for us to distinguish, is that I think that if we all agree on those being all of the concepts, all of the topics that need to be on the core guides, we also have to have the exact same template, because if I am a third grade teacher, maybe I do need the math standard core guide to look different than the health standard core guide. Maybe the health standard core guide makes more sense to do it the way Jody has it, where it's like a cluster is, or like a group of standards are together on the page.
Yeah.
Whereas the math one, it's like every standard needs its own page. That's not up for discussion. I've already made that decision 6 months ago. Different tools for each one shows that we can't come to coherence, and it puts them at a disadvantage. So I'm not really wanting to entertain that conversation again. We need a common template is my goal for today, and it'd say what comes out in the common template. That's what I'm trying to achieve right now.
So, but Jody's template has multiple standards on one page, and everybody else's has one standard on one page. So,
because yours are so long, she could still have multiple standards on one page.
Okay, but is your template? So I'm bringing that up because maybe then the conversation is, when you're wanting it to be the same, maybe we talk about what is the differences. Because in working with Jody on hers and Melissa on hers, and also knowing math, to me, they all look really good for what the goal and the
I agree.
is.
Like, I'm not discounting. You guys have done a lovely job. I mean,
beautiful and a lot of work.
Our teachers will be super appreciative. But I also have been an elementary teacher and teaching 7 subjects a day. Anything we can do to help them minimize the lift that they're taking, they will use your guide more thoroughly because they'll know how to use it without having to figure it out every single time.
And Jolie, so the only thing, so I do have multiple standards that are on one, like, literal page. The only thing different than, and I can reformat and make the related and side by side, and the other ones for like whatever. That'll take me minutes, like whatever. These are not core guides. My vocabulary
number 11.
Yeah, draft 11. And I haven't even touched secondary because I'm like I'm not dealing with it until this crap's figured out. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm grumpy. I'm being kicked too, so that. Internally. So the only thing that's different is then, Jennifer, what I have different is I didn't do vocabulary for each standard, I did it for each strand. So my vocabulary is at the very bottom. Is that like a huge problem? Like I need to like repeat the vocabulary 3 times?
Okay. Again, I don't.
I want to be consistent. I want to make it easy for teachers. That's the whole purpose. So I'm not trying to be argumentative here, I promise. I'm just, you and I had met privately, and you had at that time said that you didn't see a problem having just the vocab be for the strand instead of each standard.
I do, but again, like bringing this back to whole group, like I'm not going to be the one that says that's the template because it's not something I have to fill in.
Ours is
all I'm going to push you on is a template that can be used for every core guide moving forward. That allows for the flexibility that Melissa needs of adding more detail than maybe some of our other contents need, but it's still in the same format. I don't want to handle anyone or like hamstring anyone by saying you can't put that in there. That's not a part of it. But where could it fit? Our elements are pretty open. If you are any but creative, you can make anything fit into this guide. And I think that's where Melissa's like, I can see putting these in, and we can just put headers and they'll be fine. So I appreciate that innovation from Melissa. And so thinking about if math looks like this, and we put it in the order that we have figured out at this point from our draft 7, that has been painful. I haven't listened to, this is where, like, if you haven't been on the core or the board meeting commentary, it's been painful. Lots of discussion. I felt bad. There was a week I was gone, and I do still need to change draft 7, Todd. Thanks for the catch. But like putting the strand, the standard, the concepts and skills to master, the critical background knowledge, if we can have those elements laid out, I still think, Jody, you could probably put multiple standards if the strand makes sense, if it's similar concept, skills, and master, and put it on one page, and it would be fine. Because the layout's the same in terms of like it's strand, standard, blah, blah, blah. But that would just be my initial, like, my thinking. This isn't about my thinking. I don't do these. Let me be clear. This is not something I actually care because I don't do it. I just want teachers to have the tools you're trying to create in a way that makes it really easy for them to access. So you guys have created great material. Everything I've seen from Jody and Melissa has great content for teachers. Math has already produced these, and this is the reason why the rest of you are having to do these, because they like them so much. It's just us getting to a point that we can get beyond our own particular needs and think about the group's needs and the teachers we're serving. Ultimately, that's who gets impacted by these, not just myself here at the USBE as the content specialist, but the thousands of teachers I'm creating these for. We have 6,000 to 10,000 elementary teachers that could potentially be using your guides. We are doing them a service, but how do we not make it a disservice in some ways is all I'm trying to get at. And if we need to push back harder on me and say it doesn't matter, I'm not sure it's a hill I'm gonna die on, but I do think it matters. So, Erica.
I had a wonder, just thinking through the, like, academic language being, or vocabulary being on the beginning of a page or on just one spot or every page. I was thinking about like the mathematical practices, and those are something that's weaved in, and how many teachers have read those and utilized those throughout. So it may be something that we want to call out on every page because we know that they're looking for that specific strand and standard. But those kind of my thought is like, I think it's okay either way as long as teachers know that this is where they need to go to look for it. But so that's where I was kind of seeing both.
And I actually feel like I was saying what you said.
Okay.
That I'm, and it's kind of also what Shannon said. I actually also thought that we had agreed on the math.
Well, I'm gonna tell you, like, we're not the only people impacted, right? Computer science is building a core guide off of the conversation we had 6 months ago. So Sarah, when I sent it out, Sarah's on our listserv. She's like, let me know if it changes because computer science is already built towards this. So I think we have to realize we're not the only people building core guides, and so we're causing discord to others at the same time with our inability to get together and come together around this. I know it's a challenge. You're all trying to do great things for people, and I recognize that. But to some level, who knew it would be this hard to come to a common template? Like, I did not expect to be here 6 months later playing in the sandbox again. I would love a solution.
I've been working with computer science, and they're using like the math template. So
maybe we just go with the math template and call it good.
Are they all listed? I'm just concerned about the layout and the boxes. My big concern is if we could just have the boxes on top of each other and not have any side by side, and I don't know if math does or not, just so that different contents can fill them up as they need, and there's not going to be this awkward thing because of the size of one box.
You're thinking like just straight tabs across.
Yes.
And so we have this split, but it'd be like current grade level first, future grade level next. Kind of thing.
I'm just thinking that's going to be so easier to not have awkward box sizes depending on your content. If they're all horizontal, then we use the space we need. I mean, vertical, we use the space we need. And there's not, one column that goes on for 2 pages because it was long and one that's all blank.
Do I have a second? And then we'll open it for discussion. Jolie, a second discussion on that motion. I had to way too many meetings.
I'd like
an amendment to, no, I'm kidding.
I agree, and I think it's like, if math goes to revise them, it wouldn't be a big deal to like take the current grade level and future grade level and put them in two different rows. But I'm also wondering, like the order, if we want to put like background knowledge, current, future, like in a chronological order.
Or current, background, future.
Let me check on that, because I think in our draft 7 order, so strand, standard, concept and skill, critical background, and then those related standards parts.
Yeah, exactly that order. So background first, then current, then future.
That would be the order of future guide. So the order on the draft is what we had discussed the first time of like, this is the order. When I had Karen make the template, it was just an Adobe PDF with like title, box, title, box, title, box. It looks hideous, like it's not helpful. But I think we could easily make a template, and I can do that with the headers in this order that you fill in and make, like Melissa's, one of the challenges was like, it's not called that, so now it's just putting the content into that box.
So I think you would have that header underneath, you'd have in parentheses, this is what you call it in science. So they're going, you know, instead of, what do you mean by that? Oh, that's what you mean.
And I appreciate, we need, especially as an elementary teacher, you're a master of none, right? Like you are covering everything, and you took maybe one science class in your preparation, and now you're supposed to be this expert in science. So the more support you give, the more likely I'll be able to teach it to a higher level, right? So I get the need for differences. Jody's just asking for 10 minutes a day, 15. Like, give me something.
A week? Can I have a week? 15 minutes a week?
15 minutes a week, she'd be happy with. So just kind of thinking through that. Sarah?
I think that order with, like you said, a header, box, header, but I'm fine with that.
I'll just make a template that everyone can plug and chug into, and like Melissa will just plug the stuff in, Jody will plug again, I'm sorry. But I don't want to revisit this conversation the rest of the time I'm director, so if I'm fired next month, you can revisit. But if I am here for the next 5 years, we are not talking about this ever again. Like, I am talking. Talk about it, but I'm just being facetious, all right? But I really want us to land in a space that works for everyone. It is not about any particular need. It's saying, if we do this order in these boxes with some gray section or colored section, I don't care what that looks like, but the layout is the same. We can make this work. Are we feeling okay? My people that are currently going to do it, will that format work? Any challenge you want to talk through with the group while we have them?
We'll make that work. The one big challenge that I have is with academic language, because in science, we're trying to get away from teaching academic language out of context. So we're not separating
But
it.
they still need the words.
They do need the words, but
what I would say is in the
so
front
we're
matter,
just gonna have to put
all
them
of you, we probably need to come with like a front matter of how you teach vocabulary, because isolated vocabulary is poor practice. And I think no matter what the content, math has vocabulary, ELA has vocabulary, health has terms that they need to know. Otherwise, you can't access the content. That is the reason why kids can't access. They don't have the background knowledge or the vocabulary. We need to teach the words, and our teachers need to know which words have the highest value. But I agree, there's an issue in how we are actually teaching vocabulary. Like, the word cards are not it.
The part that I'm hung up on.
But maybe that's a work group task that we could take on with a group of stakeholders. So.
The only feedback that I've had from our field is because we've done a vertical alignment where we have 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds. So the fact that those are separated on here, where they're side by side, so they can see what they need to know versus where they're going, was very helpful for our field.
Yeah.
So to put those two together, I would be okay with that, but that's just.
Put what two, sorry?
Where it talks about like the related standards and the future standards side by side, like math does. That was the feel that we got when we did our standards. Like, they love the fact that we had the vertical alignment where they could see them.
Well, it sounds like they're staying. They're just going to be stacked instead of side by side.
Right.
I mean, the side by side is nice for a little easier visual piece of it. I'm sure that's probably why Matt landed on it. But I'm going to just go with rows at this point because I would like to end this conversation if possible. And my other thing is release the core guide when you have the components. If that means 2 more months of waiting, it means 2 more months of waiting. Because one of the major issues we have is that teachers don't understand the rigor of what the standards are asking. So if we're not releasing the vocabulary or the assessment items or critical background knowledge, our teachers don't have the adequate knowledge to address the rigor. Many of them are writing their own assessments. When you look at their rigor versus what we're expecting, they're not aligning. And our LEAs would tell you the same thing. They're like, but they test really well in our teacher-made tests. But the rigor is not there, and this is an opportunity, and I'm using the assessment because that's where Ricky brought up a question around, is if we can't show them what it looks like, then how do we expect teachers to develop that on their own? So use your committees. I mean, they're pretty skilled. You can steal stuff from like the RISE sample items even. I mean, there are plenty of things out there that we can borrow, and they don't have to be super, but they do need to show what the rigor of what we're expecting that standard understanding to look like. Because that is the part our teachers are not perceiving from the standards. They're perceiving the rigor at a much different level than what is reality. All right, I will make a template that you can enjoy and love or hate, but it will be the template of order. Writing it down, or template, and I will change that line, draft date.
7,000.
All right, moving on. We are ahead of schedule, but because it's the same group, we can be ahead of schedule, and it's not a problem. Good job, group. All right, the last thing that we've got today on our agenda is this finalizing the standards revision universal supports. And those are all those documents we worked on in groups for so long. What I'd like to do is break up into teams of 3. One person who actually helped develop that particular standard support, and then 2 people who haven't helped that are going to look at it from an outsider and give any feedback that might be helpful for that group to consider. Because if I can't walk into file step 1 and walk into those files and with some, looking and understanding, really walk away with knowing what I'm supposed to do if I'm new. Like Naomi just joined us. Naomi's here. Welcome. She will be taking on secondary ELA standards next year. If she can walk into step 1 and be able to run with that, it's going to be a lot easier for her to kind of move forward in standards revision. Okay. So it's looking at these from, you may never have to do standards. Lucky you. Some of you will. But saying, if you read what's there and what's available, is it enough for us to kind of be helpful to each other? As Robert's on step 6 or 7, he has found great value as we've moved through step 1 through 6 to have those tools available, and it's made his work a lot easier. It's also more defensible. We have a lot of pushback on our standards review committee process. We're revising the standards review process again. So just don't get comfortable with whatever review process we're on. It is coming back to committee in April for more revision. Step 12 of 14, who knows? So just know the revision process is going through again. If you're currently revising, it is the process we're currently under. Future, like ELA, it might change a little bit. Their new thing was their review committee said these things. The board wants to weigh in on what their thoughts are on review, even though that's not in statute. And the way that the policy currently is written, the board doesn't have any say on those other than to be like, thank you for sharing, go ahead and work. They want to have a little more control than currently is in policy. So we will revise again. You can see why I'm spending so much time on the same things over and over. I'm kind of at the point of the revision process will never be done. It will just continue to morph as we have different board members need their needs met. So know that one will be changing if you are up next year. It will likely be different than what it is for the teams right now. But with the 12 steps that we have, it won't be a step change. It'll just be a document change of how it goes through the board. So if I can have you kind of self-select, and maybe we just kind of start, how many tables do we have? 9 tables. We can almost kind of split up. So maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We'll put 10 over here. 11 will be up here. We don't need that many people. And 12 will be at the little round table in the back. Pick a group. We might have to not have that many staff. Maybe we just start with 1 through 6 to start. That way we have enough people, I think. Let's do table 1 will be Naomi's table. 2 is Shannon's. 3 is Audra's. 4 is Tamara's. 5 is Nate. 6 is Jolie's. Pick one that you didn't help on, but you also need to pick someone on your team who did help on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 to be there, to be the, oh, let's fix that, or oh, it's right here, kind of clarifying. And trying to get through those. Once we get through 1 through 6, we'll rotate and do 7 through 12 and get this done today so that we can finalize and move on from this project. Sound okay? All right, who's going to be the number 1 team representative? If you don't remember, go into the Google folder and figure out which team you were. I'll pull it up. one, we had Alan, Sid, Carl, Christy, or Audra at some point. You were on that team. Who would like to represent today?
I can do one.
Carl. So Carl will move to table 1. Table 2, we've got, let's see, Erica, Christy, or Sid that's in the room.
I was also on that team.
3.
I'll do 3.
That was a quick go. 4 is a large team.
I can do 4.
4 is Sarah. Okay, Sarah will do 4, which is Audra's table.
Or 3, sorry.
Oh, thank you, Sarah's table. 5.
I can do 5.
Have to be right.
I'll do 6, Jennifer.
I was just helping out.
All right.
I appreciate that.
When we get close, we'll switch to the
That's
next
really
team.
helpful.
I didn't want you to be confused.
I need support, so.
So we're just doing through 6, is that right?
Just for this moment, we'll just see how people go, 10, 15 minutes, and then hopefully switch.
I move over and Julie was there.
This one.
I was supposed to be on this team, but
8.
so much time that I never have.
I think this is the short one.
I know.
3? You have access to this document.
So good.
So if you go into Google Drive and go to share with me.
So this is standard division.
That's a different one.
And then search.
Let's do that. I'm fine with that.
That's even my
We're supposed to review with you, right?
Yes.
Just search step 03.
Misty, are you over here? Are you in the modified one?
In that, there are a couple of documents.
Did you say you take 2?
Steps for standards.
I don't think I have access.
Review membership. You need a team?
I'll join your team.
I'm just.
So, put this together. Explain how to go about
Four has the standard. Oh, sorry guys. Forget these tables are not stable.
They're not.
Unstable.
those are
Folders that have example documents. Capital specials in here, so that you don't necessarily have to go in those. Just go to each section.
So we're taking legislative.
There are a bunch of
I'm not legislative, they're the 5 parents from the Senate, the 5 parents from the House picked, and then the 7 experts that the board chair picked. And they met at minimum of 2 times, and they came up with a report.
Nice to meet
Let's
you.
chat more later.
Yeah, for sure. What do you?
I read the step pod on the.
Step 5.
requirements about growth.
I was I'm reporting right now to Jennifer.
This would
So
be
all the
the
links
5
up on the
parents,
top.
the 5 parents, and the 7 experts.
From,
Was it in there?
it speaks to membership.
Are you looking at the examples?
That link has like 12 things.
Working on it.
Yeah, the examples, yeah, because we wanted, we have science examples, math examples. Anyone who gave examples,
What did you want to start this?
we have to use any of this.
I don't know, I've been here.
Probably tell you.
I feel like they're one.
The makeup of the.
Okay. And so, like, I organized
So how they're chosen, right, if you were going through it.
So I look at it today, let me tell you, the legislature. So what I'm seeing in here is an
I
example.
wonder if that
I
would be
haven't
step
gone
3.
through this process either, so I just
I wonder if
approached
the
it from
people-
that side as well. Robert was the
One year before
primary.
I'll go to 3. And
I just walked through it.
Like just directions about
So
like,
cute,
yeah, there's like I would like to see a document that says, write a memo to the board, including reasons to consider revision.
Okay. Membership for a standards review.
Oh,
There's that. That's some, it's a written request to the superintendent.
Like, I wonder if,
With explicit.
yeah, I wonder if there could be like an overview document that says steps 1 through 12 and has like 1 or 2 sentences about each one, or like a bulleted list, you know? Because these are really helpful. If I had to write a memo, I could get in there. But maybe it looks like this template is that you just, yeah, like you just fill in the information.
So this start here, this flow
The report contains information that pertains to the revision of, like you could say, the math standards. The revision will allow us
So it's
teach
just
standards
two
for
different
teaching and learning
groups, and then they're chosen.
and you would say like it's due in time
But it's one
or
group.
whatever.
One big group, so there's 17 people in the
does
room.
change still.
7 that the standards person chooses, and then 10 that the push is to. I wonder, does that agenda template give the specialist the opportunity to talk about needs for well, because we're supposed to go to this committee with the old standards and ask them if they think they need step-by-step to make sure you get it. But we would want to justify why they think they need revision, right? Well, the committee said it's
To the other documents.
I don't think
By
that's.
high, just by saying right.
Personally, I think that if you're going through.
The current research part,
so.
That's current standards, that's where I feel like that would fit best, because instead of just saying
And maybe in this, maybe in
articles or whatever you're bringing to the table,
I'm just wondering about
you know what I mean?
the other people.
The
here's
the supervision budget, it's like so.
Ours were done.
See, like this is super helpful. I don't understand.
But I'm saying like,
Point of the next step.
does it possible for them to have access to that knowledge?
Standards assessment committee. And they would also have knowledge of this even from earlier steps.
It's because you had to ask them to establish the committee. But
I'm not suggesting it is, I'm just asking
No,
questions.
yeah.
It's like teacher stipends, teacher.
I don't think it includes
Everyone
like
touches
printing
this
the document, because it could technically be like a PDF. It's just like
the
all
committee
of
work
the
time.
activities and all of the steps. Which I was just discussing. And I'm like, oh, I'm like supervisor.
and just calculate it separate out of.
Why would that be?
You know?
Oh, the loop.
We're in the second meeting.
Flood standards review committee
It seems
meeting.
like draft the board report.
This is the.
Oh, okay. This is just to review.
Although it's a
it,
night
and then this is to write.
So, correct. So in this one, starting to switch, there's so many people.
And there's consensus majority one.
Committee. And then how science worked, I had a consensus on mine, which was unreal, but I did it.
DTL have standards though? So,
Is there a step for it?
yeah. So.
No, but she was part of it.
And remind myself
Oh,
what it
sorry.
is.
I was looking at.
No. Oh, yeah. No, I was thinking big lens, what's step 4? Step 04.
I didn't know that you had an actual House of Representatives.
This is not the
Oh,
writing.
this is their
the-
nominees. Okay,
not the writing
and they're the ones just nominating people that they think would be good to.
No,
No?
these are, the review committee is different than the writing committee. The review committee happens before you convene the writing committee. The review committee gives you the recommendation to take to the board to convene the writing committee.
What did they review and why did they recommend?
And this was brought about by the whole.
And then there's the code too, even.
We were creating.
This wasn't the last step for the entire.
No, the last step is
The very first step.
And I don't even know.
I meant just for the.
Because it ends like,
Step
yeah,
3 is
so I was
setting
like,
the welcome.
Yeah, so step 4 is the welcome email, and then it's got agendas.
There's no way to.
and-
Yes, that's the
More like a 100 step plan.
Yeah.
We just call it 12.
So what additional feedback?
I wish there was another one that actually so they were
Trying to get rid of it. We're trying to get rid
does
of
that
it.
make sense?
They're gonna be part of it. Which totally makes sense, right?
I don't know, it's just because it's so much, or like highlight.
That, like 1, 2, and 3 at the beginning.
Because of the change in assessment.
And then add a link to the specifics, I like it. But really, then in order for that to happen, we're gonna need them to be.
I would use something like that. See, that's the thing, it's almost like I need to
Someone could go change the code.
Okay, good work. We approve.
I also wonder if like you just through it, like put you and protesting Jody should like
We're gonna just read
just like clarify these are all the things, and then maybe have somebody who's not just like a yellow highlighted blank space. I don't know what that means. Yeah, that's clear.
So an expertise that makes sense to be able to someone so novice going through this.
Like, even like stuff said. Yeah, mostly it's like, this is just kind of navigation for a million.
Our entertainment last week, did you hear it?
And so number 2 is this board approval for standards review, so the staff's been sitting up.
Found out that beloved now we have to learn a whole new program.
So maybe that is
And
what
it's not
it is.
even about,
That is
it sounds changed, but it's not about, it's about diversity and respecting others.
Maybe but like the bullet easier for me to read. Timeline, a reason.
And we loved our program before, and we don't have time to teach it. Get used to it. Girls program back is fraught with.
Yeah, like copy that language that says, and then make a bulleted list of the things in the template. So, yeah, you can share.
Oh, I didn't make stuff through.
I mean, I don't know, they're like, I asked them, it was the training, the first one, it was wild.
And I want to find out who at the Utah, at the office mandated this. Yeah, it probably was me who inadvertently mandated it.
I had 2
Which I
weeks
didn't.
off where I was
I sent him an email and said, you might want to consider using this.
And I was like, I had some
As
sort of
opposed to
science.
the other one that has had some controversy.
It's just.
So I kind of got back to my routine this week.
You should go back and find that letter.
That was funny. I mean, funny, not funny.
She was so passionate. But the funniest statement was, it's not about Utah studies. It's not about Utah history now. It's about respecting others.
If I do an hour of yoga,
Like the second Sunday,
There's no place for that in Utah studies.
I know this because I was looking at going to lab. Or sitting still, or laying still, or.
I feel like it would be like,
My way or the highway.
like reasons to consider revision. This has timelines. And estimated.
We're different in 2002 when that original program was made.
Do you want to submit a memo?
And I also did.
Well, the memo must include.
2002, they've been doing a program every year. Do we want to?
You guys good for listeners to consider the revision? Ready to move on?
Well, that is.
So we're kind of helping each
Just embrace their year for their.
We're done.
So reasons to consider we just haven't done for you.
That's instead of
From like doing bicep curls.
Go doing a jig.
Come on. Years of experience, you have 1 year of experience repeated 30 times.
Writing committee and supplies.
Because the lesson plans were nicely laminated.
I don't know that.
Nice, right?
Yeah.
love her idea.
The draft goes to the full board.
I think we got all that.
One of our students had a whole bunch of baby goats, so they brought the baby goats into her class and they did goat country.
You're in a school district.
So they did
So
goat
this
country.
is the last one comes out.
They'll stand on you, they climb on you.
Oh, yes.
That's right, that's right.
It is inappropriate on so many levels.
Don't you think?
Yes. Yep.
Yes,
Yes, yep. Animals, the double. Yes, yep.
If the first can prove that you have a budget, you can, and then you're proving to be low.
Like, you did it. Nope, not fun. Nope.
Sarah,
What?
I sent you an email.
I'm sure you did.
Probably.
Allergies. I was gonna say, it would have had to have been either Friday or Sunday then.
Yeah, so it's about a concurrent enrollment circumstance that I have an answer to, but I just want you to show me the answer that I already have. It's related to this circumstance that came up before previously. It's a professor who has a degree in communication that the district wants them to teach an ELA course, like concurrent enrollment course.
Most of the groups ready, you need a couple of minutes for it, that's fine. Move on.
1 year old. I said not 1 year old.
Smolia and Molia were 7. Who feels comfortable leading that one?
Oh, I can do that. You can do it. I'll do it.
Okay, so this is 7.
Just a 1 year.
You know, 8.
In all places.
Thank you, let's do 8. Back at your normal table, would that be okay? Yeah.
But it's not going
Anything over there?
Although, but my computer doesn't still needing anything.
You can borrow mine.
Until you're done with me.
Well, they come up.
Shannon.
Probably easier for me to pick it up.
Because of this appointment.
Jamie's got this one. Alright, 9 is back there. 10.
Reduction in staff policy.
Malia?
I can do 10.
Sure. Stay here. We're gonna stay right here, 10.
And 12.
That's kind of funny, we're gonna.
Because that is something that's
No enough to be dangerous.
I was on like 4 different groups, so yeah, I can.
Alright, perfect. I think 12 is actually a pretty easy one.
Turn around.
It should be okay. There you go. Alright, so 12 will be.
Right here, right here, right here.
She'll just
Right there.
So just turn around.
She's good with that.
Right up there.
You know what?
You gotta go from the
I just kept getting was already on the program. I really do. Readiness to provides a lot
Thanks
more.
for your feedback.
It's possible.
You're welcome.
Here for you.
Redistribute yourselves.
Because there's going to be possibly at least.
I like it.
Is someone coming to 8? I don't know what to do.
But, oh, what's 8?
Page 7, if you guys, are you guys?
I was on 7.
I don't remember because when I come,
You're doing
because I know
7.
I worked on it forever and ever.
Jody needs someone on 8, Kathy.
I'll
Okay.
join Jody.
Nope, I don't.
Going somewhere.
Okay, Jody, tell me which one we're reviewing.
We're on 10. We got 10.
Numeral.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, my computer's so dead. But
7 and 11 are on.
Number 8.
Treasure is not plugged in, and it's that one.
Description of qualities.
Number 8.
7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
It's gonna work.
Okay, 90-day public review. 90-day public review.
I'm just learning.
And I just got a charger, well, I'm still it's charger.
For a moment. 10 is the feedback.
Opening again.
Okay, I'm turning on again, so you guys will be done before I turn on.
Review. I'm gonna just.
I was just waiting for which document it
We have the folder on this.
Got it, I got the folder open. I see you. I see you on
Thing, but Ricky finished it while I was in another step.
I only see 2 files.
That's all I see. Also,
Oh, I didn't know that. For the writing committee.
One is an example of the quadrant.
so I'm gonna copy.
Yes.
The writing committee.
Oh, yeah. And yes,
Most times they're the only ones
Maybe for yours.
not for mine. But I found it incredibly helpful for them to be there because I don't get to say anything.
Category standards and
I just thank you so much for your comment. Thank you so much. Then they get to say, well, here's why we did this. And I just get to say there, you're an idiot. Thank you so much for your comment. I think the idiot part.
What's the title of this document? In the Google Drive?
Step 8 checklist.
The first one I just
Like the need for quadrants
Yeah,
and an
so I
example of
can
quadrants.
Do you think it would be helpful to link, like if this is the checklist, like agenda to leads, example of your like. Okay, so those are in the 90 days report, so you're saying to link them to that folder.
Yeah, even though they're in the.
Oh, like the
I'm just writing it in the description of content
sample.
survey, which I'm gonna.
Right, so it's just the example,
See if it makes sense.
example, actually there's.
Yeah, I mean, do look at the template board member to see if you have any questions, but I'm just telling you that
Need a split
I
screen.
think the one we want to spend time on.
That's how.
Draft standards ready for release.
That way, if they're looking at this checklist.
This lady over here.
That's how Sarah's was a link.
I get you.
Yeah. And we didn't link the examples. They had their separate folder. We linked all the templates. This is what you have to go on.
Create survey questions, example of your.
Feedback both online and from.
Like, is there guidelines for how many public comment locations?
Here's a summary sheet of major revisions, meet the original draft.
That was my wonder too.
Data board backup.
Need to have 4, don't you?
Draft standards.
How many do you have to have?
That's just if you don't.
So, I don't know anymore.
The only thing is like
It
the
was,
survey
the
option or
statute was
something,
3,
you ask
but
them
I
if they
had
want
7.
the board would complete a survey?
Because the board, they get to choose. No, because the board said I didn't go to every spot in the state of Utah. But then Ricky did 3, but he did online, and that fixed his not needing to add 4 more to go to places that he didn't go.
And if they choose the survey,
The statute says 3.
you have to make the survey for them.
Processes to make sure that you send
The
this
draft
prior
for
to
the
the
board.
Say that.
So that seems pretty clear.
I think that would be important.
Is that my stuff? Yeah.
I mean, I just had questions on the first time, I would know the process that I was in.
You would know what you're asking.
It's a really long, I needed 1 and then 2.
So let's go back and make sure I have a template.
I should just hyperlink it then.
Yeah, and you can put whatever text you want.
What's step 9 and step 11?
Is that supposed to be access?
But this isn't the feedback from the writing
Really
committee.
spell the.
So 9 is
It's like an access committee, but it is
website, which is where
So Mark will post to the public notice website.
Okay.
after the 90-day review, look at all the public comments and make
Should
changes.
we, maybe that's where we say.
And send it to the board.
If this is
Send it back to the board. They now have an opportunity to
Oh,
provide feedback.
Everything
But
goes
then,
That's where they got that.
reconvene your writing committee.
So do the same thing again.
Has
but
it
with the board's
changed? Is
feedback
it
as opposed to
still required to be 3 meetings, 3 public meetings, the 90-day public review?
I would just
It's
say.
still 3?
Writing look at that.
She said yes, it is 3.
Which number it is, when you go back and look at your boards, you've gotta address, based off of your feedback, these are the changes we made.
Yeah, just say a minimum of 3.
At least having lived it, that was.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me.
Well, but this is after the draft.
And then if you go
So
look at
hold
step
on, let
8.
me, public review.
Not that we need to look at step 11 if you.
Then the revised draft is step 9,
Yeah, but that's just in the public comment.
right?
Now, step 10 is you've gotta send it out to the boards, and they've gotta give you feedback, and you've gotta revise based on their feedback.
The way it's described, each board member is
So go to open
to receive the revised draft to provide specific feedback for additional consideration and revision. Board members will use an online survey to provide their suggested changes. Staff will then summarize those changes.
When you have finished with your groups,
Step
you may
11 is
exit.
at the writing
This
committee.
project is done in my mind unless you come up with something today. And looking through the folder, it's super exciting. Like, I would actually know how to go about a standards revision process, so good job.
All you're doing is just looking at those changes.
Please go get lunch upstairs.
That's open book. There's a full reel for you today.
We're not Google, search it.
First lunch.
And snacks, two snacks.
They want to see that you made changes based on.
But that's in step 11 now.
Okay.
So much food. Is where you compile and then have to draft, right?
But we didn't go back to the board. There wasn't a step between where we said, here's your feedback, go back to the board and tell them the feedback. And then go back again and say, this is like, put it all together.
I never have either.
It's equity. One of the stands for equity. I don't know which E.
Did you know what the ACEES?
Got it out, clocked it.
What does the acronym stand
Just
for?
standard.
I only know that one of the E's is equity. That's the only thing I know. So there's like a Native American leader on there, there's a Latino leader on there, there's religious leaders on there.
Wrong acronym that I can never remember.
I have no idea what it stands for.
Oh, she got them to do it.
The access
This is like,
link.
put me to say all, I
Here.
mean, it doesn't make sense.
Advisory Committee on Equity of
There you go.
Educational Services for Students. We didn't go
We
back
kept
and
seeing the
summarize it.
ACEES, that other one.
Oh, gotcha.
We need to not do that anymore.
The WeBeds.
Oh, that's not the
Yeah,
one.
we need to stop having.
But when I searched for it, it changed it to access.
Oh, because it's self-corrected.
And then it came up with
It seems like they're.
But I
What's the
had
first
to
letter?
add equity, advisory.
Advisory committee.
And I had to add the word
To get it right.
That's the search number.
Good
to know.
I told you equity, that's the only thing I knew.
It's what it is. It is the equity committee. I wish
I guess the C I could have told you committee.
Committee changes things, then you go.
Advisory.
All right.
Advisory council.
It's interesting.
Oh, council?
Okay, whatever.
We really want to have that move items to core guide as necessary.
A week.
But we didn't go back to it and summarize the survey feedback
We really
until we
want
made
to
the
see
changes. We said, based on these revisions, based on what we saw here, we made these revisions. So it really wasn't. As far as I know, and I'm the
Summarizes changes for the board to discuss and vote.
A good point.
They did never, from my set of eyes, were ever discussed and vote on.
I don't know that the core guide wants to get mixed up in this, just saying.
I mean, that's just how the core guide sort of has, so
That was
when we
the
had something,
impetus for it?
when we had something really specific, and it was too specific, the grain size was too small, that it would help with the core guide. So it gave the explanation to what the standard meant. The standard needed to be a bigger grain, and so anything that was really small and more explanatory would be moved to like a document that would create the eventual core guide.
Right? So then in step
Maybe
11,
use the core guide, where are you looking? Can you tell me where that is?
It's under the last agenda.
this is where the new stuff happened.
And then I
most recently because
these are all
Melissa
right.
said you guys didn't do this,
No,
right?
we,
Okay.
they sent out the feedback, based on that feedback, we summarized it internally, made the changes, and then went back to them and said, based on the summary, these are the changes we made. Should.
I'm like, this is something I do every week.
Yeah, but professional. So now it's basically, we have like a feedback form, staff looks at it, puts in all their comments. Okay.
Yeah, so my question for 11 is,
We would propose, but then we put in every board member's comments.
Shonda and I wrote this at the University of
Assist in core
That way no
guide
one-
creation, how about that? Does that sound? Move items to assist in core guide creation as necessary.
No process to
Does that
change
sound
it
to
at
us?
this point.
In the comment on letters, this just documents here.
I would just add revised standards based on feedback. That's where I'd end.
And now I'm like, I've never made a PowerPoint.
But that's me, because this is not about core guides. This is about
It's the same structure. We were using this one and this one, and so I just started calling the elementary math. I just did one that says like professional learning presentations, and then I started putting it in there because I always wanted to go copy it and like change it and make a new one and
Reply.
so from there. So I like but I have tabs like just elementary math. But if you
Show
go,
you one thing that I didn't know.
Summarize all the feedback,
Start the folders in.
but this is where we were questioning.
there is a timeline.
Add them to your starts.
So I actually sent,
But I think you're just summarizing all
sent them the minutes, not the summary. I don't know if that makes sense.
You gotta do your revision
Or
and
summary.
you go back and see. This was your feedback, so we did this change.
But is that step 11? That's step 11 though, to go to
Do a
the
recording
beginning.
of the public.
And that's where it's like, kind of continuous.
Yeah, it's right there. And then put all those things in place.
And I told you.
That's board action, right? So there's gotta be a vote.
Just a
So
story.
what are we voting on?
That's correct. This is staff will summarize the changes. That's what was thinking.
Yeah. What are we voting on?
So maybe the caption.
Or document.
Because recording sounds like, seems like
Good job.
Right? And I have.
No, we recorded to help Crystal
And everything
notes,
else, like
and
if it's not
then
something
later
that you
found
use,
that to be a
like
huge
an
problem
article I wanted to
because
say.
now you're recording a public meeting that needs to be stored.
I like that.
So admin users,
Vision
like, so I have an ESS, help desk, minus, Utah grants.
So it looks like to me, we've got 9, we
Yeah.
just have the changes based on public feedback. Then attendance gotta go to the board.
Intent should be like.
It's the public, it's the public minus, like all the things you just log into, Canvas. Like active operations,
So there's gotta be some revisions made in 10 to take back.
Where do the, yeah, that's my question, is where do the, because on 11, it says one comprehensive
well,
document.
this I actually did before this, they should have get rid of all my folders, trying to find one out. So
11 is like your
showing us like realize what it really like I used for other like relations.
Right. So my question
I
is,
did this before then.
no, actually,
Yeah, so just
I would take that bullet out, because next one says it.
I think we're just like, how do I gather this?
And then for like things like I'm in the middle.
Now I have the feedback. So, but what,
I had one before and I made it like.
oh, so that's, can we take that
Survey
This
gets
is
1,400 responses to my survey.
discuss and vote
So I had a meeting.
over, I'll get rid of it.
I think all the, because we found that there was still like 30 days left on the survey. We met to
And then staff meetings just because.
kind of discuss some of
And then elementary math is
public
just
ones.
like in there,
While the survey was still going, then we met again and looked at all the survey.
Is that what we want to put in the
So there's
guidelines?
this assessment thing I
Your
work on.
situation
there's, like,
was
all my
somewhat,
information.
It was unique and huge.
I actually think this one is in there, but I pulled it out because I used this.
I know science met before it was done too.
Started doing this one because I'm like I've been just saving them
Because there were
wherever, and now I
thousands
have
of
them.
responses between all the public ones and the online. We looked at over 2,000 responses.
Like summer
my question is just,
other summer
does
too,
that
like
second bullet,
and then I just have like our main articles or our main
the second bullet
cover committee. They're just like things I work on.
So like when I have like.
says, if it doesn't, could you add
Schedule
schedule meeting as needed? Schedule interim meeting as needed.
Directors, yeah, all those things. So then this just like I'll use it regularly, like our website. Like I share this with people a lot. Like my go teach. Okay, so it's
That's also.
the same problem.
That was.
Checking out the website to get to the actual process, because that language is not.
Yeah, it also makes me think how much I would update my website.
Yes, I just did 3. The other, yep, I just did the 3.
But then also you can go to like if there's like a common thing on the website, and then an application all the time. They're like, oh, how do I apply for reimbursement?
Yeah, those are the only templates. And then there's like a whole bunch of examples of like the
Yeah,
ones.
so I just had that for both math and computer music,
Yeah,
because they
and
really
that's
had
what
two
it's
separate jobs, so
You're gonna start
a lot of
with
so I just did both, like one for each. So,
and
and
I
then
have feedback, and then I have to send it to us.
and either have it clear project something you could put there, and then I had to,
I would have just ended after revising
Sending out the survey together, right, feedback, that's all it is.
11 is.
But whatever, yeah, works for you. And I still need to clean up this after, like, on my to-do list, I have a list to like clean up on my list.
We don't even split it. We're to keep it.
Just gather the feedback.
I would say to submit it to their consent.
I am down to 11 hours.
Take your advice. Or you can view the revised draft.
Archive versus deletion.
That's it.
Well, no.
So delete,
Some
it goes away. Archive, there's like deleted from your inbox.
There was
I
a
just
this one is like I had to create a.
But don't keep things here.
That's what you're done with.
Right, but that's attached to your standards.
Yeah, an archive. Yes. Like if somebody just says thank you, like you shouldn't delete it, but like if it's
Yeah, I would delete that too, because the revised
Well,
standards.
driver's ed has one too.
I'm like, I can't get rid of it.
Right, but that's part of the revised standards based on
archive.
That's part of the revision, isn't it not?
No, the standards is a completely different document that was approved in a completely different process. This was a
But it was
supplementary.
part of your required process of
No,
getting
it
your,
was I didn't request.
but that's what I mean, as getting your standards approved.
It came after. Driver's ed has one, theirs is actually in code, they have to have.
The only thing is like there's attachment
Is separate from the standards, because the law changes faster than we finish, than we can fix standards. So as law changes, we have to revise these law booklets. Like, Hill has 6 pieces of law.
Okay, so I'm getting to speak your thing to you.
So as any of those change, we need to change.
Once
everything the board? No, I can go in and change them. They just have to approve what words I defined for teachers. They were really worried about what was gonna define abstinence, apparently.
Another task, like I'm gonna call it.
So bullet 3 is the Greg Smithing suggestion, see what you think. Discuss election climate committee to discuss necessary revisions based on public feedback.
So add in the word necessary.
And then take out that need to be made.
You're welcome. And now it's out of my email. And over here that I, on my
Don't talk too much about the staffing.
This was a group document.
you call it
Everyone's different ways of speaking is in one document. Some of us are a little more concise than others.
like 2 words. And then like